His death is unavoidable. There has to be another way. This isn't my judgment. It's the consequence of his choices.
My name is Marcus, 35 years old, single. Hair like a bird tried to nest in it and gave up. Dark circles carved so deep under my eyes, they looked permanent. Sunken cheeks, a slouch that had long since stopped being a posture problem and started being a personality trait. I was the kind of man people looked through, not at, and I was fine with that. Had been for years. My sister married when I was 26, moved away, built a real family. We drifted apart the way people do when one person builds a life and the other just continues. No falling out, no dramatic break. She just stopped calling, and I never had the energy to wonder why. No relationships, no ambitions, no plans that extended past next month's rent. I wasn't depressed. That's important to understand. Depression implies you want something and can't reach it. I'd simply stopped wanting. The machine ran on routine, and routine was enough. My apartment cost 30,000 yen a month. The building was so old, the stairs groaned when I walked down them, like the whole structure was begging to retire. But it had a bath, and the landlord kept the rent low, so I had nothing but gratitude for that crumbling place. Every evening at 6, I climbed onto my bicycle and pedaled 10 minutes to the convenience store. The evening air felt good in my lungs. That was the best part of my day, honestly. 10 minutes of air that didn't smell like fryer oil or floor cleaner. I arrived, parked my bike in the corner of the lot, and walked in through the front entrance. "Good evening," I said to the housewife working the afternoon shift. She gave me a half-hearted greeting without turning around. I was already past her, heading for the back office. Standing near the register making small talk was a complaint waiting to happen. If we needed to talk, we could do it in the office where no customers could see. I didn't clock in. Today was the shift submission deadline. I'd been at this store long enough that scheduling had become my responsibility. There was no time during my actual shift to build the schedule, so I came in early, unpaid, and worked through it before my hours started. Building a schedule sounds simple until you realize everyone wants the same days off. Our owner kept staff at the bare minimum, so there was no room to run short on any given day. And half the staff didn't submit their availability on time. The students forgot. The older employees assumed I already knew their routine, so I called them one by one, confirming their hours. Some of them yelled at me for asking. I was used to that. By the time I'd gotten the schedule halfway done, it was 8 in the evening. Tonight's shift had a hole in it that nobody else could fill. My actual shift started at 10, but a 2-hour gap meant the store would be short-staffed, and there was only one person flexible enough to cover it, me. I put down the schedule, changed into my uniform, and walked out to the register. No one thanked me. No one noticed the gap had been filled. That's the thing about invisible work. When it's done right, people assume it was never needed. The night shift was its own kind of war. Restocking shelves meant pulling every item forward, slotting new stock behind them, and doing it fast enough that no customer had to wait at the register. After midnight, I cleaned the fryer, the steamer, the Odin pot. Each machine, disassembled, scrubbed, reassembled. Then came the walk-in cooler. 40 cases of drinks, each one a cardboard box that needed to be opened, sorted, and shelved in under 20 minutes. 30 seconds per case. When I first started, it took me an hour. Now I did it in 20. My back paid the price though. Painkillers had become as essential to my routine as brushing my teeth. After the drinks came the frozen goods. New stock went to the bottom of the display, which meant pulling everything out, crouching low, sliding the fresh product underneath, and restacking. My lower back screamed every time. More painkillers. By morning, I'd finished mopping the floors, cleaning the outside lot, prepping the breakfast items. The overnight kid clocked out at 8. I stayed. My break was 45 minutes, and I spent it finishing the schedule from earlier. When the schedule was done, I went back to the register, even though my break wasn't over. We were supposed to have 2 people on the floor during this window, and if I sat in the office pretending to rest, the store would suffer. Then noon came, and the lunch rush hit. Students from Oak Ridge High School poured in to buy their meals. It was my alma mater, though that felt like a fact about someone else's life. A girl at the register paused and looked at me. "You seem really tired," she said. "Are you okay?" I blinked. "Oh, well, I've been working since last night's shift, so that's rough. Hang in there." A high school girl going out of her way to say something kind to a haggard convenience store employee. That was unexpectedly nice. I bowed my head and thanked her, then went back to scanning items. As she walked away to rejoin her friends, I heard one of them say it. "You, Sophie, that's embarrassing. Don't talk to him. He's creepy. People will think we know him." "That's too harsh, Yuki." Creepy was accurate, so I didn't mind. You develop a thick skin when your appearance has been a punchline for 2 decades. The kind girl, Sophie, her friend had called her, was the exception, not the rule, and exceptions don't change the pattern. After the rush, at 1 in the afternoon, the university student who was supposed to start at 11 finally showed up. I clocked out, but I didn't leave. I gathered the trash, broke down cardboard boxes, sorted the garbage area because the day crew always left it a mess. Finally, I went to grab my bag from the office. "Excuse me, Reed-san, there are some students hanging out in front of the store, and a customer complained. Could you handle it?" I could have said no. I was off the clock, but the kid asking me looked nervous, and this kind of thing rolls downhill. If I didn't deal with it now, it would become the store's problem, which would become the owner's problem, which would become my problem. So I put my uniform back on and walked outside. 4 students from Oak Ridge High were sitting on the ground near the entrance. 3 boys and a girl. The boys had the kind of energy that makes older people cross the street. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm sorry, but would you mind not sitting in front of the store? It can be a bit of an obstruction for other customers." "Huh? The hell you say, old man? We're just sitting here." "I understand, but this area isn't really meant for resting. Other customers have mentioned it. So, who's complaining? I'll kill him. And you too, you piece of—" 3 of them were on their feet now, surrounding me. One grabbed the front of my shirt. I'd been here before, literally. Convenience store employees get death threats more often than people think. I'd been cornered by Yakuza once, 10 of them. At least these were teenagers, and they hadn't actually hit me yet. Then a voice cut through. "Hey, leave the old man alone, you idiots." The 4th student, a girl, tanned skin, bleached blonde hair, Oak Ridge uniform, worn loose and rebellious. A delinquent style that felt almost retro. I knew her, Jade, my older sister's daughter, my niece. She wouldn't remember me. The last time we'd been in the same room, she was in elementary school, back when my sister's family still acknowledged I existed. The families had drifted apart. My sister married, moved on, built a life. I stayed behind and slowly became the kind of relative people forgot to invite to New Year's. But I recognized her face. Even through the dyed hair and the tan, the features were the same as the little girl who used to hide behind her mother's leg. "Yo, Jade, you siding with this dude? I'm telling you to use your brain. Takashi just got picked up by the cops last week. You want to end up the same?" The boys backed off, grumbling. One of them jabbed a finger at me on the way out. "Watch yourself, old man. Next time I'll really kill you." Jade didn't look at me. She probably hadn't even registered that the shabby store clerk shared her blood. That was fine. Watching her handle those 3 with nothing but attitude and authority, she had real leadership in her. It was wasted on a delinquent crew, but it was there. I was still thinking about that when the light hit. It started from the students. A blinding white glow that swallowed their bodies and spilled outward. The boys panicked. Jade spun toward me and grabbed the front of my shirt. "What did you do, old man?" "Nothing. I'm a convenience store employee. I don't have the power to make people glow." "Then what the hell is this?" I didn't know. But a magic circle had appeared beneath our feet, and Jade's grip on my shirt meant I was standing right in the middle of it. The light swallowed everything. My last thought was that I hadn't slept in over 24 hours and really just wanted to go home. Then I lost consciousness. I had nothing to leave behind. No one waiting for me at the apartment. No one who'd notice I was gone. Just a pot of miso soup on the stove that would go to waste. I wish I'd had a second bowl that morning. I woke up standing in a blank white space. Dozens of Oak Ridge High students surrounded me, all in uniform, all confused. A few adults who looked like teachers were trying to maintain order. A voice filled the void, soft, female, achingly gentle. "Welcome, heroes." The students panicked, naturally. A disembodied voice in a featureless white dimension tends to unsettle people. But if you've been screamed at by invisible customers on the phone and punched by strangers at 3 in the morning, a polite goddess is nothing. She explained the situation. Another world, a demon king, a war. They'd been summoned as heroes by a kingdom called Runeguard, and she was the goddess who oversaw that world. She couldn't send anyone home, but she could give them power. "I will now distribute cheat skills to each of you." She started with the title skills, the cream of the crop. The hero skill goes to Kyle, the boy who'd spoken up earlier, blonde, pierced, but with honest eyes. He was the only one who'd protested the summoning. He'd challenged the goddess directly, not for himself, but because he'd recognized the danger to everyone else. He was wrapped in light and vanished. The goddess sent each person through immediately after granting their skill. Smart system. If everyone saw each other's abilities beforehand, jealousy would ignite. She processed them like customers at a register, one at a time, efficiently, no lingering. The goddess knew how to manage a queue. I respected that. The saint went to Sophie, the girl who'd been kind to me at the register. The sword saint went to a buzzcut boy I recognized from early morning bread runs at the store. The sage went to a quiet, bespectacled student I didn't know. Then came the special skills. Magic nullification, absolute appraisal, skill mimicry, instant death magic, perfect recovery, assassination arts, super acceleration, weakening, brainwashing. One by one, students raised their hands, received their power, and vanished. I noticed things. Habit from the store. You learn to watch people. The delinquent boys from earlier all got powerful skills. Instant death magic went to the one who'd threatened to kill me. The irony wasn't lost on me. The girl named Yuki, who'd called me creepy, got magic nullification. A gray-haired boy with a lip piercing and no school uniform received brainwashing. I remembered Jade mentioning someone named Takashi getting arrested. This might have been him. Giving a brainwashing ability to a teenager with a criminal record seemed questionable, but the goddess had a system, and I trusted systems. One by one, they all received power and vanished. Dozens of students, a few teachers. The white space emptied like a store after closing time. Everyone left, and then it was just me. "Excuse me," I said to the empty white space. "I'm still here." "What? Who? Wait, why? I already sent everyone." The voice was different now. Gone was the serene divine register. This was a woman caught off guard, the polished customer service voice replaced by genuine bewilderment. I like this version better, honestly. I checked. All cheat skills are distributed. I sent exactly as many people as the summoning requested. "So who are you?" I introduced myself politely. Marcus Reed, 35, single, convenience store, shift leader. She was baffled. The summoning targeted the 4 hero title candidates and everyone socially connected to them, meaning classmates and teachers. A convenience store employee had no business being here. I explained that I'd been grabbed by students at the moment of summoning and dragged into the magic circle. "You're saying that so calmly? That's really sad. What kind of person gets grabbed by teenagers and just accepts it?" I didn't mention the Yakuza. That would have made her feel worse. The problem was simple. She had no cheat skills left. She couldn't send me back to Earth, and she couldn't transfer me to the other world without giving me something. Rules were rules, even divine ones. For a brief, stupid moment, I thought about staying here with her, a man and a woman's voice, alone together forever. I'd had less promising romantic prospects. "I can read your thoughts, and that is disgusting. You creep." "Fair enough. Wait, actually, I might have something." Her tone shifted, suddenly hopeful. "I've got this huge collection of garbage skills I was going to throw out. Scraps collected from monsters, plants, random objects. I used them as research material for making real cheat skills, but they just take up space now. If I give you all of them, it should count as a proper skill transfer, and I can send you through. Garbage skills. The goddess's recycling bin. Scraps from monsters, plants, and inanimate objects that she'd analyzed, extracted, and been meaning to discard. I was, quite literally, a dumpster for a deity's unwanted inventory. Even in another dimension, I was getting the leftovers. But a gift is a gift. In my line of work, you take what's offered and figure out a use for it later. Expired products get marked down, not thrown away. Discontinued inventory still moves if you know the right shelf for it. That works for me. Thank you. Great. Here you go. Trash skills. Launch. Something slammed into my chest. Not one thing. Dozens. Hundreds. Skills crammed into me like inventory into an overstuffed stockroom. It hurt. Not my problem. If you're gonna die, do it over there. Goodbye. Launch. Light swallowed me again. I woke up in the center of a grand hall. Stone floors, vaulted ceiling, banners on the walls. Where am I? Who are you? Identify yourself. Armored soldiers surrounded me. Every one of them held a drawn sword pointed at my body. This was familiar. Replace the swords with box cutters and the armor with leather jackets. And it was a Tuesday night at the store. At least these men hadn't hit me. I explained, calmly and carefully, what had happened. I named the summoned heroes I could remember. That convinced them I'd been through the same process, even if I'd arrived late and alone. The commanding officer removed her helmet. She was a woman, sharp-featured, serious, and clearly in charge. "I am Marceline, Knight Commander. I was assigned to escort summoned heroes to their briefing. Pleasure to meet you, Marceline-san. I'm Marcus Reed, convenience store shift leader." She didn't know what a convenience store was. She asked if it was some kind of rank or title. I told her it was, in a way. One of these summoned heroes had apparently told her that female knights in our world were called Kill Me Knights. She found that educational and said she was glad to learn about cross-cultural military terminology. I decided not to correct the misunderstanding. What mattered was her eyes. When I relaxed after hearing the heroes were being treated well, she noticed. "You have a kind face, Reed Dono." It softened the moment I mentioned the heroes were safe. I scratched my cheek, embarrassed. Working behind the scenes with whatever meager power I had, that was my style. Noticing people wasn't supposed to work in the other direction. Marceline brought me to a small room and briefed me personally. The Runeguard Kingdom was a major nation, the largest in the region. A war had been ongoing with the Demon King's forces for 10 years, originating from disputed territory in the monster forest along the border. So this war with the Demon King isn't exactly good versus evil, I said. As a knight, I cannot nod to that statement, which was itself a nod. It was a territorial dispute, dressed up as a crusade. The kingdom had kidnapped children from another world and planned to use them as weapons in a land grab. Torn from their families, I said quietly, can never go home. And instead of a holy war, they're being sent into a political conflict, used as tools. If I were not a knight, I would say the same. Marceline's expression was exhausted. She was a woman who'd been carrying guilt she couldn't voice. Knight commander is a middle management position, when you think about it. Too high to pretend you don't see the problems, too low to fix them. I understood that weight. I'd been a shift leader at a convenience store. It must have been hard on you, Marceline-san, I said. She blinked. Pardon? Having to carry out something like this, bringing children to war. Knowing it's wrong, but swallowing your objections because that's what your position demands. That kind of burden, it eats you alive if nobody acknowledges it. She stared at me for a long moment. Something behind her eyes cracked, just slightly. That is unfair, Reed Dono. Striking at the heart of a person so suddenly. Sorry, but people who work hard deserve to hear it. She smiled. Small, real. The first genuine warmth I'd seen in this world. After the briefing, I was escorted to the throne room with the rest of the summoned heroes. It was the first time I'd been in the same room as all of them since the White Void. The heroes were assembled in neat rows. The king sat on his throne, old and imperious, and delivered a speech about the Demon King's treachery, how the demons had betrayed a pact of cooperation, invaded without provocation, massacred innocents. I didn't buy a word of it. The story was too clean, too one-sided. No nation starts a war out of pure evil. There's always a trigger, a failure of diplomacy, a slow accumulation of grievances. But admitting that would mean admitting fault, and kings don't do that to their new weapons. I noticed the adults were missing, the teachers who'd been summoned alongside the students, adults with enough life experience to recognize propaganda when they heard it. They'd been separated, isolated, probably being convinced somewhere out of earshot. The king promised rewards, gold, land, power, women, everything a teenager with too much adrenaline and not enough context could want, and it worked. Most of the heroes were swept up in it. Kyle, the hero, burned with righteous purpose. Sophie nodded with determination. Only Matsuria, the sage, looked bitter, but even he held his tongue. Now then, the king continued. Before we adjourn, I'd like to see your power firsthand. Display your status boards. Every hero summoned a translucent panel of light. I did the same. Name, Marcus Reed. Level 1, Strength. G, Magic. G, Stamina. G, Speed. G, Attribute, None. Skills, Error. All. G, the absolute bottom. And where the skill field should have listed abilities, it just said Error. Not because I had none, but because the goddess had crammed so many garbage skills into me that the board couldn't display them all. Nobody thought to investigate that, though. They saw error and assumed it meant empty. The record keeper frowned at my board, scribbled something dismissive on his clipboard, and moved on without a word. I was used to that expression. It was the same look the store owner gave the night shift expense reports. Then, Kyle's status board was enlarged for the entire room to see. The record keeper practically trembled with excitement as he read it out. Kyle, level 1, Strength, S, Magic, S, Stamina, S, Speed, S, Attributes, Light, Flame, Healing, Fighting Spirit, Skill, Hero, S rank in everything, 4 attributes where most people had none. A was supposed to be the human ceiling. Kyle had blown past it before leveling up even once. The record keeper explained that S existed among high-tier monsters, SS among elites, and historical records mentioned a dragon at SSSS. The scale stretched far beyond what anyone in this room understood. The Saint, the Sword Saint, and the Sage all had SS in their primary stats. The crowd gasped at each reveal like it was a parade. The kingdom had gotten exactly what it ordered. 4 superhuman weapons, gift-wrapped by a goddess. Then, one of the delinquent boys spotted me. Hey, check this out. This old dude's got the most insane stats I've ever seen. All G, every single one. He was laughing. They were all laughing, and I let them. Because here's the thing. Some of these kids had been terrified. Their stats were low, their skills were narrow, and they were facing a war they never asked for. But looking at my board, seeing someone even more pathetic than them, it gave them relief. A small, mean comfort. And I'd rather they laugh at me than spiral into the kind of despair that makes people controllable. Besides, I'd noticed something none of them had. My skill field didn't say error because it was empty. It said error because it was full. The goddess had crammed so many skills into me that the board couldn't render the list. Every hero in this room had one skill, maybe two. I had dozens, hundreds, perhaps. Nobody had bothered to ask why. I stored that fact away. It wasn't useful yet, but someday it might be. After the status check, the heroes were dismissed to their quarters. I was held back, just me, the king, and his advisors. His framing was deliberate, dripping with contempt. He told me I'd intruded on the goddess's domain uninvited, that the trash skills were her punishment for my trespass, that I was useless to the heroes and potentially dangerous. I pushed back, politely, the way you push back on a customer who's wrong but has the power to get you fired. The skills I received were given to me by the goddess as tools for survival in this world, I said, not as punishment. They may be unwanted by the heroes, but the goddess placed them in my hands of her own will. The king's expression soured. He wanted me to crumble. I'd seen that look before, on every district manager who expected the night shift guy to take blame without argument. Regardless, he said, you are useless to the hero effort and will be expelled from the palace immediately. I understand your position, your majesty, but if we're speaking of the goddess's will, then the fact that she delivered me to this very palace, the same destination as the heroes, must carry some significance. To expel someone the goddess herself placed here, might that not be seen as defiance of her intent? It was a gamble. Everything depended on how much political power the goddess's religion held in this kingdom. If the temple was influential, the king couldn't risk looking like he was acting against divine will. If it wasn't, I just wasted my breath. The king's eye twitched. He called his advisors close. They whispered. I waited. Very well, he said, after a long, irritated pause. Expulsion will proceed, but not for 1 week. During that time, Marceline will serve as your monitor. You may move freely within the palace. Use the time to prepare for your departure. 1 week, 7 days inside the palace walls, access to information, resources, and most importantly, the royal library. The king thought he was being generous with a condemned man's last meal. He didn't realize he'd just given me the keys to the pantry. Thank you, your majesty, I said, and bowed deep. I meant it too, not the gratitude, the bow. It was the same bow I gave to every difficult customer at the store. Head low, posture humble, and behind that posture, a mind already running calculations. 7 days, no combat power, no allies, no cheat skills, just a collection of abilities the goddess herself called garbage, a body held together by painkillers, and the work ethic of a man who'd been running convenience stores on 2 hours of sleep for a decade. I'd been given worse starting conditions. I walked out of the throne room with Marceline at my side, already composing a list of what I needed to learn. The magic system, the skill system, how enchantment worked, what each of my trash skills actually did, whether any of them could be combined, whether the systems of this world had inefficiencies I could exploit. The king had looked at me and seen nothing. The goddess had looked at me and seen a trash can for her unwanted inventory. The heroes had looked at me and laughed. That was fine. I'd spent 35 years being invisible. Being underestimated wasn't a handicap. It was a head start. Somewhere in this palace, there was a library, and in that library, there were answers. I had 7 days to find them, and I intended to use every single hour. A convenience store employee doesn't waste time. We can't afford to. There's always another shelf to stock, another shift to cover, another mess someone else left behind. The only difference now was the scale. 7 days. That was what the king had given me. 7 days before I'd be thrown out of the palace, with nothing but the clothes on my back and whatever I could fit inside my head. So, I decided to fit everything. Marceline escorted me to the grand library the moment we left the throne room. I asked politely. She sighed and led the way. I think she'd already accepted that I wasn't going to spend my last week moping. The library was enormous, ceiling-high shelves stretching in every direction, filled with more books than I'd seen outside a university. And unlike a university, I actually wanted to read these. I started pulling books off the shelves, dozens of them. Magic theory, skill classification, enchantment fundamentals, material science. I carried them to a reading desk in stacks so tall, Marceline raised an eyebrow. You're going to read all of those? No, I'll skim them first, keep maybe 1 in 10, and actually read those. Then, tomorrow, I'll rescreen the ones I rejected, because my understanding will have changed overnight. Repeat until the week's up. She stared at me. That's oddly methodical. I used to read like this in college. Got so obsessed with it, I stopped attending lectures, then dropped out. I paused. In hindsight, that wasn't the lesson to take from this. Marceline made a sound that might have been a laugh. Hard to tell with her. Over the next 5 days, I barely slept. A few hours here and there, just enough to keep the words from swimming. Marceline sat nearby, reading her own books, occasionally glancing over at me like a parent watching a child do homework. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. and on the 5th day, I found what I was looking for, not in one book, but scattered across dozens of them. The pieces of a puzzle nobody had assembled because nobody had the reason to. Skills and magic. Two systems, fundamentally different. A skill is a rule that sits above physics. A trigger condition goes in, an effect comes out, and there's no causal chain connecting them. Touch something, drain its life force. No mechanism, no explanation, just a contract with the world's operating system. Magic, on the other hand, follows the rules. Draw a magic circle, channel mana through it, and the resulting phenomenon happens because of a chain of cause and effect. Physics, but expanded, like chemistry with extra steps. Anyone can use magic. That was the first revelation. You don't need a special attribute. You don't need a skill. You need a circle and mana. That's it. The attribute holders just skip the circle because their bodies act as one. But for someone like me, with no attribute at all, a properly drawn magic circle could replicate any spell. That was interesting, but it wasn't the insight that changed everything. The insight was this. Skills can be placed into objects using enchantment magic, a process that takes a skills, trigger, and effect relationship and embeds it into physical material. So the object itself fulfills the trigger conditions the human body can't. It clicked into place like the last piece of a jigsaw puzzle I'd been staring at for 5 days. I had hundreds of skills, garbage skills, monster skills, plant skills, mineral skills, skills whose trigger conditions required a body I didn't have, claws I didn't possess, roots I couldn't grow, chemical processes my biology couldn't perform. But if I enchanted those skills into objects that could meet the trigger conditions, a stone with the right mineral composition could activate a hardening skill meant for a rock-type monster. A piece of cloth woven from plant fibers could trigger a defense skill meant for a thorn bush. The skills weren't garbage. They were inventory without a shelf, and enchantment magic was the shelf. Nobody had figured this out before, not because it was impossible, but because nobody had the right combination of circumstances. Researchers studied within their specialties. Warriors used skills through their bodies. Nobody had 100 useless skills, and the desperation to find a use for them. Nobody except me. The convenience store had taught me to see systems, not just tasks. When a product doesn't sell on shelf A, you don't throw it away. You move it to shelf B. You change the context. You find where it fits. I had just found where my garbage skills fit. On the 6th morning, I asked Marceline to introduce me to someone who could teach enchantment magic. She sighed, warned me that the court mage was a handful, and led me to a spire on the west side of the palace. The door opened on its own. Inside, a voice called out from behind stacks of research papers. "Maru, Maru, what brings you here?" The court mage of the Runeguard Kingdom was named Sage, and Sage looked like a 12-year-old girl. Blue-bobbed hair, enormous eyes, a robe so ornate it seemed to be wearing her rather than the other way around. The top of Sage's head barely reached my stomach. "This is Reed, from the other world," Marceline said. "He wants to learn enchantment magic." "An otherworlder? Ooh, I'll listen. Tell me, tell me." Sage rushed over and latched onto me like a child greeting a parent at the front door. I looked at Marceline for help. "Don't mind it," she said flatly. "Despite appearances, this one is over 100 years old and male." "Male," I repeated. "Indeed." I processed this information. It didn't change anything, honestly. Sage was adorable regardless. I explained my theory, the garbage skills, the trigger conditions I couldn't meet, the enchantment solution. As I spoke, Sage's playful expression slowly sharpened into something focused and professional. "You know," Sage said, quiet now, "I ran a similar experiment years ago, embedding high-grade metal skills into low-grade materials. It worked. But the magic circle complexity and mana cost made it impractical for anyone else." A pause. "For you, though, if you're embedding your own skills into objects, the cost drops to almost nothing. You could learn this in a day. That's very helpful. Call me Sage, and I'll call you Mark. Your real name is too long and not cute enough." "Understood, Sage." Over the next 2 days, Sage taught me enchantment magic. He was an excellent teacher when he wasn't trying to fluster me, which was about 30% of the time. I also picked up basic recovery magic and support spells. My mana was pitiful, maybe 1 healing spell per day, but enchantment magic was efficient enough that I could perform 10 enchantments daily. Sage said that was embarrassingly low. I took it as a compliment. On the morning I left the palace, Sage was waiting at the gate. "Farewell gift," he said, handing me a worn storage bag. Inside were supplies, money, tools, a map of the capital, and a handwritten notebook. The cover read, "Enchantment Magic Records," in Sage's messy script. "This is my personal research data on enchantment magic. It's not pretty, but for someone building a life on enchantment, you'll need it." I held the notebook like it was made of glass, a researcher's life work, handed to a man he'd known for 2 days. "Why?" "Because you're my apprentice now, so it's fine," he grinned. Also, I want to see what happens when someone with fresh eyes uses my data. Consider it an experiment. I patted his head. He leaned into it like a cat. Thank you, Sage. I'll make it count. You'd better. That's a promise, Mark. He waved as I walked through the gate. The court mage of the Runeguard Kingdom, 100 years old, looking like a child, waving goodbye to a convenience store employee, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I was expelled. I was alone. I had no money, no allies, no home, and stats so low a 10-year-old would pity me. But I had a storage bag full of supplies, a notebook full of secrets, and a head full of knowledge that nobody else in this world had assembled the way I had. It was more than I'd started most jobs with. The capital city of Runeguard spread out before me, loud and busy, and completely indifferent to my existence. My destination was simple: the Adventurers Guild. In this world, adventurers were somewhere between mercenaries and freelance laborers. They hunted monsters, gathered resources, and sold what they found through the guild. The guild managed them, ranked them, issued ID cards, and took a healthy cut of everything. A franchise operation. I recognized the model immediately. I walked through the guild doors, cleaner than expected. Reception windows on one wall, a quest board on another. I stepped up to the nearest window. Welcome. How may I help you today? The receptionist's nameplate read Shirley. She was young, polite, and had the practiced smile of someone who dealt with difficult customers for a living. I liked her immediately. We were the same species. I'd like to register as an adventurer. She handed me forms. I filled out everything: name, age, status, skills. I wrote my stats honestly. Level 1, all G, skill field, error. Shirley's smile faltered when she read the form. Level 1? At 35? Most people are level 2 or 3 by age 10, just from daily life. Consider it a medical condition, I said, showing her my status board. She stared at the board, at the G rank stats, at the error field, then back at me. Her professionalism held, barely. I was registered at G rank, the lowest tier, below even the standard F rank starting position. Shirley handed me a guild card made of something that felt exactly like plastic, but was apparently a magical metal alloy called soft iron, flexible, heat-resistant, corrosion-proof. There's a newcomer's manual on the shelf over there, Shirley said, pointing to a reading corner. Most new adventurers skip it, but I'd recommend giving it a look. I intend to memorize it. She blinked, then smiled, a real one, this time. I read the manual cover to cover, gathering locations, monster habitats, ecology notes, weak points. Most adventurers skipped it because they couldn't read well enough. Their loss. My first job was herb gathering, a 30-minute walk to the forest outside the capital. I chose herbs deliberately, not because I loved plants, but because it was the only work I could survive. G-rank stats meant any monster could kill me, but herbs don't fight back. What I lacked in strength, I made up in preparation. Before leaving the palace, I'd enchanted a threadbare cloak with 3 skills: shape memory and shock absorption from soft iron, and blade resistance from a plant called needle cotton. The cloak looked like garbage. It stopped blunt weapons and deflected blades. When 5 goblins surrounded me in the forest, one swung a club at my head. The cloak absorbed the impact like a pillow. The goblin stared at its weapon, confused. Then I activated another skill: aging smell. The stench that erupted from my body was so vile that even I winced. The goblins, with noses far sharper than mine, fled with their arms over their heads. I had apparently possessed this skill since long before the goddess gave me anything. A gift from my own body, earned through years of night shifts and no sleep. The skill check confirmed it. I'd also acquired reading, speed reading, and perfect memory from my college library days, and insomnia from my chronic inability to sleep. Insomnia would have been torture for anyone else. For me, combined with recovery magic, it meant I never needed to sleep. I worked through the night, healed the fatigue with magic when my mana recharged, and kept going. The night vision skill from some cave-dwelling monster let me see in the dark. And then there was disease, a skill from a plague-spreading monster that generated experience points whenever its holder made a human unhealthy. The condition was broad enough to include the holder themselves, which meant my sleepless, recovery magic-fueled lifestyle was constantly making me unhealthy and constantly leveling me up. Within weeks, my stats had climbed from G to C across the board. Level 48, still pathetic compared to the heroes, but strong enough to punch a goblin into next week if I had to. I settled into a rhythm, gather herbs all night, walk back to the capital at dawn, arrive at the guild when it opened at 6, before anyone else showed up, and deliver my haul to Shirley. She was always there. The newest staff member got the worst shifts, and Shirley worked from early morning to closing. The dark circles under her eyes reminded me of my own. "Do you ever get a day off?" I asked one morning while she sorted through my latest delivery. "Not recently. A senior receptionist is leaving, and they haven't replaced her yet. I might be working 7 days a week soon." I made her an offer, an exclusive contract. In the guild system, an adventurer could designate a specific receptionist as their sole handler. The receptionist got a bonus, confidentiality protections, and most importantly, regulated working hours, 40 hours a week maximum. If Shirley worked mornings only, processing my daily deliveries and handling regular business until early afternoon, she could go home by 1 every day. She accepted before I finished the explanation. Over the next 3 months, I became the guild's most reliable herb gatherer. My knowledge of the forest, my ability to work around the clock, and my access to rare specimens that other gatherers couldn't find made me increasingly valuable. The nickname Herb Uncle started as mockery and became a term of respect. Shirley's reputation rose with mine. Then, one morning, I saw a familiar face walk through the guild doors. Tanned skin, bleached blonde hair, sharp and wild, eyes that used to be soft but had hardened into something wary and defensive. A school uniform worn loose and rebellious, like armor against a world she didn't trust. Jade, my niece, the girl who'd grabbed my shirt and dragged me into the summoning. She was trying to register as an adventurer. I used a skill called eavesdrop and listened from across the room. She told the receptionist she had no family to rely on, no home. She'd been kicked out. The palace had expelled her, a teenager in a world she didn't understand, with nothing. She couldn't read the quest board. She couldn't navigate outside the city. When 3 men approached her with offers of easier work, she told them where to go in language that would have gotten her suspended from school. I stood up from my corner seat and walked over. "Excuse me, this young lady is my acquaintance." The men backed off immediately, not because of me, because I had connections to C-rank veterans who would make their lives very unpleasant. Jade stared at me. She didn't recognize me at first. The messy hair, the dark circles, the slouch. Then, something clicked behind her eyes. "Wait, you're that old man from the convenience store. Marcus Reed. Nice to see you again, Jade. Don't act friendly with me. I got expelled because of you." She grabbed the front of my cloak, tears building in the corners of her eyes, despite the fury on her face. The tough girl act cracking under the weight of being alone, broke, scared, and 17, in a world that made no sense. I didn't argue with her, didn't correct her, didn't point out that the goddess had dragged us both here, and that blame was a luxury neither of us could afford. "Have you eaten today?" I asked. "What? Food? Have you had any?" She hadn't. Of course she hadn't. I took her to a cheap stall near the guild and bought her a meal. She ate like someone who hadn't seen food in 2 days. Probably because she hadn't. While she ate, I told her the basics, how the guild worked, how herb gathering paid enough to survive, where the safe zones were, what to avoid. She listened without looking at me, but she listened. "I'll help you get started," I said. "After that, you decide what you want to do." "Why?" "Because children should eat every day, and because you're family." She flinched at that word. Family. Like I'd poked a bruise she'd forgotten was there. "Whatever, old man. Don't expect me to thank you." "I never do." That was how I found Jade again. Not as a hero rescuing a damsel, not as an uncle asserting authority, just a convenience store worker offering a meal and some practical advice to a kid who needed both. Meanwhile, 3 months of herb gathering had given me what I needed: savings, knowledge of the local economy, and proof of concept for my enchantment skills. Small experiments during my nightly rounds confirmed what the theory promised. Skills embedded in objects worked. But adventuring wasn't the path. The guild was a machine designed to churn through laborers. Low-rank workers gathered resources. Mid-rank workers did dangerous jobs. High-rank adventurers served as advertisements to recruit the next generation. Most died before reaching the top. The real money wasn't in gathering. It was in adding value, processing, creating, selling. Every convenience store taught you that. Raw ingredients are worth pennies. A rice ball is worth a meal. I had skills nobody else had, knowledge nobody else had assembled. And now, thanks to Sage's notebook, the practical tools to apply it all. One morning, I told Shirley, "I'm going to step back from adventuring." She stopped sorting herbs. Her hands went still on the counter. "You're quitting?" "Not entirely, but I've saved enough to start a business. I'm going to open a shop." She was quiet for a moment. Then she looked up at me, and there was something fragile in her expression. Something I recognized because I'd seen it on the faces of coworkers at the convenience store when I told them I was changing shifts. The look of someone who'd found a reliable person in a sea of chaos and was watching them leave. "I understand," she said. "You're too smart for herb gathering anyway. I knew you'd move on eventually. That's generous of you. It's the truth. You read the newcomer's manual on your first day, Reed-san. You were never going to stay." She smiled, but it wobbled at the edges. "For what it's worth, you were the best adventurer I've ever worked with. The most polite, the most reliable, the most dedicated. My ideal. Your standards might be too low. Don't ruin this," she said, and laughed. It sounded a little wet. I thanked her properly. I meant every word. Shirley had been the first person at the guild to treat me without condescension, and her professionalism had made my 3 months there smoother than they had any right to be. When I bowed, she bowed back, deeper, and held it long enough that I knew this wasn't just protocol. Walking out of the guild that morning, I had a plan. Enchantment magic turned trash skills into functional tools. Tools could be turned into products. Products required a shop. A shop required a location, inventory, and someone to help run it. I had the skills. I had the notebook. I had the savings. And as of yesterday, I had a 17-year-old delinquent niece who needed a roof over her head and something to do with her hands. The king had looked at me and seen a man with nothing. The goddess had looked at me and seen a garbage can. The heroes had looked at me and laughed. None of them had looked closely enough. A convenience store employee doesn't dream of being a hero. He counts the inventory, checks the expiration dates, and opens the store on time. And when nobody's watching, he rearranges the shelves until the products that nobody wanted are suddenly the ones flying off the rack. I had 7 days of knowledge, 100 garbage skills, an enchantment notebook, a storage bag, a stubborn niece, and absolutely nothing to lose. Time to open shop. The building was a former inn on the edge of the inn district, 40 years old, stone and timber, with a wide entrance facing the street and 4 rooms upstairs. An elderly couple had run it for decades until the husband threw out his back. They sold the whole thing, land included, and retired to a quieter neighborhood. The real estate agent told me this like it was bad news. A location that nobody wanted, too expensive for a new inn, too far from the commercial center for a regular shop. I saw something different. I saw foot traffic. The road out front connected the Adventurers Guild to the residential streets, and every working adventurer walked it twice a day. I saw the wide entrance, big enough for a customer to step inside without feeling committed. I saw the kitchen that could become a back office, the upstairs rooms that could house inventory and people. I saw a convenience store that didn't exist yet. The guild's guarantee letter impressed the agent. Apparently, Shirley had arranged something beyond a standard reference, a responsibility guarantee, the kind normally reserved for veteran adventurers of real distinction. The agent's eyes changed the moment he read it. My 3 months of herb gathering savings covered the purchase, 90% of everything I had. The agent counted my gold coins on the counter, one by one, honest enough not to skim a single piece. I signed the papers. Just like that, I owned property in a fantasy world. A 35-year-old former convenience store worker with a deed to a building and a storage bag full of garbage skills. My mother would have been proud, or confused, probably both. I brought Jade to the building that same afternoon. She walked through the dusty entrance, looked up the narrow staircase, and said nothing for a full minute. "Which room do you want?" I asked. "The one farthest from the stairs." She didn't explain why. I didn't ask. The farthest room was the one that felt most like hers, the one nobody could stumble into by accident. In a world that had expelled her, locked her out, and tried to sell her to predators, she wanted a door with distance behind it. I understood that. She was staying. That quiet choice said more than any handshake. We cleaned for 2 straight days. I reinforced the worn floorboards and cracked walls with enchantment magic, while Jade swept and complained and swept some more. The entrance became the shop floor. The old kitchen became the back office. I repositioned the counter to face the door at an angle, the way convenience stores place their registers, so the clerk can see every customer who walks in and every product they touch. 15 years of watching shoplifters had burned that reflex into my bones. "Why is the counter facing that way?" Jade asked, leaning on her broom. "Customer flow. People enter, turn right instinctively, browse the wall, circle left past the displays, and arrive at the counter. High margin items go on the right wall. Impulse buys go near the register. We maximize every visit." "You sound like a robot." "I sound like a man who has sold 14,000 rice balls." She stared at me for a long moment, then went back to sweeping. I chose to interpret that as respect. I found a broken long table behind the building. Solid wood, good grain, just missing its legs. Perfect for a shop sign. I asked Jade to handle the lettering while I went out for supplies. "What should I write?" she asked. "Cave Dwarf Magic Tool Shop." Cave Dwarf? A character from a famous fairy tale in this world. Short, lives underground, makes things. I've been told I look like one. Yeah, I can see that. She said it so casually that I couldn't tell if it was an insult or an observation. Probably both. I left her with Sage's magic circle brush and ink, quality tools from the palace, and headed for the guild, not for herbs this time. I asked the receptionist for their discarded magic stones, the small ones, the ones drained of mana during the transfer process and thrown away like dead batteries. Every adventurer who kills a monster leaves behind a magic stone. The guild drains the mana into standardized stones for resale and tosses the empties, mountains of them, useless to everyone. The receptionist gave me a puzzled look, but wheeled out 3 bulging sacks on a handcart, free of charge. To the guild, these were waste. To me, they were the raw material for everything that came next. Back at the shop, I set up my workspace. 2 enchantment circles drawn on wooden boards. Simple designs, my own skills, my own mana, nearly zero cost. I placed a garbage magic stone on the first circle and channeled mana. Moved it to the second circle, channeled again. 2 skills embedded. The first was photosynthetic storage, a skill from plant-type monsters. It absorbed light and converted it into mana, storing it inside the stone. The second was bioluminescence, from glowing moss, a cave-dwelling organism that consumed tiny amounts of mana to produce light. A pulse of external mana could toggle the effect on and off, because glowing moss instinctively dimmed when it sensed foreign mana, then resumed once it faded. Together, these 2 skills turned a worthless pebble into something this world had never seen. A rechargeable, solar-powered lamp with an on-off switch. I carried my first stone outside into the fading sunset and held it up to the red sky for 10 minutes. Passers-by stared. I didn't care. When I brought it back inside, the moment I crossed the threshold into the dim shop, it began to glow, warm and steady, about as bright as an oil lantern. I channeled a tiny pulse of mana, off, another pulse, on. In my old life, I would have called this a nightlight and bought it for 300 yen. In this world, it was a revolution nobody had ordered. That same evening, I set up Jade's first job. I positioned the enchantment circles on the floor, side by side, and explained the process. I would handle the first circle, the skill-specific one that required my presence. She would handle the second, place the stone, channel mana, wait for the glow, move it to the finished pile. That's it? She said, that's it. This is boring. Boring is the foundation of every successful business. You're depressing, old man. Thank you. I had designed the process deliberately. The assembly line, division of labor. Any operator could run the second circle as long as I was within range. The enchantment was coded to my skills, but the mana cost was borne by whoever activated the circle. Jade's A-rank magic power made her perfect for this. She could process twice as many stones as I could before tiring, her vast mana reserves pouring into each activation like a fire hose filling a teacup. A goddess's cheat skill, wasted on a girl the palace had deemed worthless. Except here, on a shop floor, channeling mana into garbage stones that would become products that would become revenue. Her skill was gold. The world just hadn't found the right shelf for it yet. By the time she went to bed, muttering about boring uncles and boring rocks, we had converted every garbage stone in the shop. The next day, I studied the competition. I walked through every lighting-related shop on the merchant street, memorizing prices, materials, customer demographics, torches, cheap, disposable, popular with aggressive adventurers who used them as backup clubs, oil lamps, fragile, high maintenance, unpopular in the field, glowing moss lanterns, silver coins, the mid-tier favorite among working adventurers, mana-powered lanterns, gold coins each, plus ongoing maintenance costs for mana stone refills. The market had a clear gap. Nothing existed between affordable but weak and expensive but good. My lighting stones outperformed everything, longer lasting than mana lanterns, more durable than moss, rechargeable with free sunlight, zero maintenance, and the raw materials cost literally nothing, but I didn't price them at nothing. Convenience store rule number 1, price communicates value. Set it too low and customers assume the product is garbage. Set it too high and you lock out your core market. I wanted working adventurers and ordinary townspeople, not nobles. Silver 10 to 20, depending on stone size. 1 tier above glowing moss lanterns, accessible to anyone with a steady income. High enough to signal that this was a serious magic tool, not a trinket. Low enough that a customer wouldn't agonize over the purchase. The sweet spot where convenience stores live, not luxury, not bargain, but but reliably good at a fair price. I also enchanted the scrap cloth robes I'd bought from the clothing shop. Blade resistance, shock absorption, shape memory, the same skills I'd used on my own adventuring cloak. Rags that could stop a sword. I priced these as add-ons, cheap enough to bundle with stones, expensive enough to cover the orphanage's cut. Jade's sign was waiting for me when I returned. She had not written Cave Dwarf Magic Tool Shop in clean professional letters. She had written the Cave Dwarf's Magic Tool Shop sign in bubbly, cute handwriting, with the flourish of someone who'd spent an hour making it exactly right. The formal name I'd requested, cheerfully ignored. The result? Undeniably better. "I told you to make it cute," she said, hands on her hips, grinning. I looked at the sign. I looked at her. She was smiling for the first time since we'd been reunited. A real smile. Not defiance, not frustration. Something warm. "Perfect," I said, and meant it. We mounted the sign using the adhesive mucus skill. This required me to spit a powerful bonding adhesive onto the back of the board. The moment I did it, Jade's face contorted in such absolute horror that I thought she might quit on the spot. "Die," she said. "Just die. It's a skill. The adhesive is, I don't care what it is. You spat on the sign I made. Die." She called me disgusting 11 times in 4 minutes. I counted, but she held her end of the sign against the wall while the adhesive dried. Her face turned away, her dignity barely intact. The sign held. It would hold through rain and wind and whatever else this world could throw. Opening day was quiet, painfully quiet. A few adventurers wandered in, saw rocks and rags on the shelves, exchanged glances that said, "Interesting concept, zero confidence," and wandered out without buying a thing. One man actually laughed. Another picked up a lighting stone, sniffed it, put it back, and left. Jade sat behind the counter, chin in her hands, watching each non-customer leave with the expression of someone calculating exactly when to start panicking. "Old man, we're going broke. We've been open for 4 hours, and we've sold nothing. Zero, not one rock. Patience. The seed is already planted." Before opening, I had given a free lighting stone to Gaius, the boisterous C-rank adventurer I'd manipulated with flattery during my herb gathering days. Loud, proud, and utterly incapable of keeping a secret. The moment he used the stone in a dungeon, he'd tell every adventurer within earshot. A walking advertisement in plate armor. He was a loudmouth and a braggart. He was also the best free marketing in the capital. It worked faster than I expected. The next afternoon, Gaius kicked the door open with all the subtlety of a siege engine. "Reed, they're saying you're selling garbage for silver. That true?" "The rumors are accurate," I said. "Would you like to see the garbage glow?" He bought 3 large stones at silver 20 each. 60 silver coins. My first real sale. He left promising to spread the word, and he did, loudly, constantly, to anyone who would listen, and several who wouldn't. By evening, the rumors had flipped. The shop selling garbage for silver was now the shop selling magic for silver. Within a week, adventurers were lining up at the door before I opened. They came for the stones. They stayed to gawk at the enchanted robes. I demonstrated the robes by having a young adventurer swing his sword at me while I wore one. The blade bounced off the scrap cloth with a dull thump, and 3 newbies bought a set on the spot, their mouths hanging open. For the first time in my life, I watched a product I had made fly off the shelf. Not rice balls someone else had manufactured, not prepackaged bentos assembled in a factory. Something I built from garbage with my own hands and my own skills. Something nobody else in this world could make. It felt different, like the difference between sweeping someone else's floor and building your own house. The initial rush tapered after 2 weeks, once the adventurers who could afford the stones had bought them. The pricing did its job, high enough to prevent hoarding, low enough to generate steady demand among those who needed time to save up. 5 or 6 stones a day. Regular customers returning to buy for family members. Townspeople trickling in, curious about the magic lights their neighbor had bought. The rhythm of retail settled over me like an old coat. Open, stock, sell, clean, restock. Except I never closed. Insomnia plus recovery magic meant the Cave Dwarf's Magic Tool Shop was the only 24-hour establishment in the capital. Late-night customers found the lights on and a tired-looking man behind the counter, ready to serve. The night shift had never really left me, but at least this one was mine. Once the shop found its rhythm, I turned to the next piece. I walked through the residential district, past the cheap housing where soldiers' widows stretched copper coins into meals, until I reached a stone building with a cross on its roof and children's voices tumbling out of every window. The orphanage. I'd found the connection through a robe shop on the Merchant Street. Their cheapest product was a scrap cloth robe sewn by orphans, rags stitched together during sewing lessons and sold for copper coins. Charity in disguise. I'd bought 12 of them, enchanted them, and turned them into better defensive gear than most adventurers could afford. Now I wanted the source. Isabella, the orphanage director, met me at the entrance. A woman in a nun's habit with a face built for kindness. The sort of expression that made children trust her on sight and merchants underestimate her. I introduced myself as a magic tool shopkeeper. She introduced me to the children. There were dozens of them, playing tag in the courtyard, shrieking and tumbling over each other. War orphans, most of them. Fathers killed on the front lines. Mothers worked to death, trying to survive alone. The moment they saw me, the youngest pointed and shouted, "A cave dwarf." I was a fairy tale character come to life. They chased me around the courtyard for an hour. I let them catch me, pretended to be defeated, handed out promises of candy I didn't have. A boy named Joan organized the teams. A girl named Rosa watched from the sidelines, her hands folded the way people hold them when they're used to working. It had been a long time since anyone was genuinely happy to see my face. The business proposal was simple. I would supply proper fabric, not scraps. The children would sew real robes under Rosa's leadership. I would buy every finished piece at half the market price of a standard robe, far more than the copper coins they currently earned. In return, I got a steady supply of base quality robes to enchant and sell at a markup. Isabella listened with trembling hands. When I finished, she bowed so deeply her veil touched the table. You have no idea what this means for us? I think I do. I signed the contract with a wooden stamp I'd carved the night before. She signed with tears in her eyes. Joan watched from the doorway, absorbing everything. I told myself this was strategy, community investment, a future labor pipeline of trained, loyal workers who would grow up inside my system. Rosa would lead the sewing team. Joan would coordinate deliveries. The children with green thumbs could cultivate herbs. Every skill I'd identified during that hour of tag could become a job someday. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was simpler. I saw children running barefoot during wartime, and the part of me that had spent 15 years working through holidays so other people's kids could have rice balls on Christmas morning, that part would not look away. Convenience store workers don't save the world, but sometimes on the night shift, when a mother comes in at 2 in the morning to buy milk for a crying baby, you ring her up quickly, bag it neatly, and tell her to have a good night. You don't change her life, but you make it slightly easier for one small moment. The orphanage deal was the same thing, scaled up. I couldn't end the war. I couldn't bring their parents back, but I could make sure they ate and learned and had something useful to do with their hands. The shop was working. The products were selling. The orphanage children were sewing. And for the first time in this world, I felt like I was building something real, something that would still exist if I stopped touching it for a day. Then everything changed because Sage walked into the shop. "Yoo-hoo, Mark! Miss me?" Blue bobbed hair, a robe that wore him rather than the other way around, an expression of mischief and barely contained intellectual excitement. Marceline stood behind him, armored and stern as always. Jade leaned close and whispered, "Old man, those two were VIPs at the palace. How do you know people like that?" "Networking," I said. Sage picked up a lighting stone, turned it over, put it down, picked up a bigger one, held it to the window. His eyes went wide, then wider. Then he grabbed his own head with both hands and screamed, "You can't be serious! Mark, do you understand what you've done?" I had made a lamp. Apparently, I had also shattered a century of enchantment research. Sage explained while pacing and waving his arms, like a man trying to flag down a runaway carriage. Decades ago, researchers had tried to harness glowing moss as a renewable mana source, embed its photosynthetic properties into objects, break free of the dependency on monster-harvested magic stones. Every team failed. Moss was alive. It consumed its own mana just to survive. It was fragile, expensive to cultivate, and the net energy yield was pitiful. The research was shelved permanently. My lighting stones bypassed every single limitation. A magic stone was inorganic. It didn't eat. It didn't die. It didn't consume mana to maintain itself. The photosynthetic storage skill embedded in it converted sunlight to mana with zero overhead. An existing technology could transfer mana between stones, which meant if you mass-produce photosynthetic stones, Sage said, his voice cracking on every other word, you create a facility that generates mana from sunlight. Unlimited mana, the energy barrier that has limited enchantment magic for centuries. You just erased it with a garbage stone and 2 trash skills. I made a lamp, I said. You made a lamp that changes the world, you ridiculous man. Marceline's expression shifted, the look of a military commander recalculating supply lines. Jade stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Sage proposed the deal on the spot, a military contract, bulk lighting stones for the front lines, worth more gold than a decade of herb gathering. In exchange, the Cave Dwarf's magic tool shop would receive official palace-affiliated workshop status and research funding. I had conditions, deliveries in installments. I would not become a production drone, and investment. Real money for the real plan, a mana production facility, industrial-scale enchantment, a factory. Sage challenged me immediately. How could I mass-produce enchantments if I was the only person whose skills could be embedded cheaply? The cost of using anyone else's skills would bankrupt nations. I told him to think about the photosynthetic stones one more time. 3 seconds of silence. Then Sage screamed again. The factory generates mana. The mana powers more enchantments. More enchantments make more stones. More stones generate more mana. It's exponential. Mark, that's not a business plan. That's a civilization upgrade. I was thinking of it as vertical integration, I said. He stared at me. Then he laughed so hard he had to sit on the floor. We formalized everything in writing that afternoon. 3 contracts. The military supply agreement, with installment delivery schedules and pricing locked at a fair rate. The research partnership, giving Sage access to my methods and me access to his theoretical expertise and palace resources. And the official designation of the Cave Dwarf's magic tool shop as a palace-affiliated magic research workshop, a title that carried weight in this kingdom, protection from competitors, and a budget line from the crown. Marceline witnessed every page and facilitated the kingdom's paperwork with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had decided, once and for all, which side she was on. She wasn't watching me anymore. She was working with me. Somewhere between the library and this shop counter, I had graduated from surveillance subject to investment. That evening, after they left, Jade came downstairs and sat across from me at the counter. She was quiet for a while. Then, "Hey, old man, how come you ended up as a convenience store worker? Back in Japan, I mean. You're smart. Really smart." Today proved that. The question caught me off guard, not because I didn't have an answer, but because she was the first person in either world to ask it. "I read too many books in college," I said. "Spent 6 years in the library instead of attending class. By the time I realized I needed credits to graduate, I was 3 years short with 2 years left, so I dropped out. After that, the only jobs open to a man with no degree, no social skills, and no references were the ones nobody else wanted." She was quiet for a moment. "That's kind of sad, old man. It is what it is." No, her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. "It's sad. You could have been anything, and you ended up selling rice balls at 3 in the morning to people who didn't even look at you." The accuracy of that description hit harder than it should have. She'd worked at a part-time job in Japan. She knew what invisible labor looked like. "And now I'm selling magic stones at 3 in the morning, I said, "to people who look at me and see a cave dwarf. Progress." She almost smiled at that. Almost. Then she went upstairs, and I heard her door close, the farthest room, the one with distance behind it. And I stood there for a while, thinking about the fact that my 17-year-old niece understood my old life better than anyone I'd worked alongside for 15 years. Later that night, alone again, I stood behind the counter and looked at the shop. The lighting stones on their display shelf, casting warm light across the wooden walls. The enchanted robes on their hooks. Jade's handmade sign visible through the window, catching the last glow of evening. Outside, the street was empty. A stray cat crossed the cobblestones, glanced through the window at the glowing stones, and kept walking. Even the cats in this world had better places to be. I pulled out Sage's enchantment notebook from under the counter, dog-eared now. Some pages stained with magic circle ink, others annotated in my cramped handwriting. I flipped to a blank page at the back and wrote 2 words in Japanese, because some thoughts belong in the language you were born to think in. Next product. The convenience store worker in me never rested. The shelf was stocked. The register was balanced. The customers were satisfied, but there was always a next product, always a better arrangement, always one more thing that could be done before the morning shift arrived. Nobody was coming to relieve me. This was my store, my shift, my life. And for the first time in 35 years, that thought didn't feel like a prison sentence. It felt like a beginning. A beginning needs people. I had a shop, a product line, a palace contract, and a niece who called me old man with something approaching affection. What I didn't have was enough hands. Jade and I were running a 24-hour operation with 2 bodies and 1 insomniac. The math didn't work, even by convenience store standards. So I put the word out through the adventurer network. Simple job, fair pay, no combat required. I targeted the demographic most likely to need stable employment, widows of fallen adventurers. The logic was cold, but sound. Adventurers talked to each other. Their families heard everything. And the women who had lost husbands to the front lines needed income more than anyone. The first hire was straightforward. A widow of a C-rank adventurer, competent and eager. She started the next day. The second applicant was something else entirely. Maria walked into the shop with the posture of a woman who had once attended formal dinners and still remembered which fork to use. Well-dressed, well-spoken, warm in a way that felt practiced but genuine. Behind her stood two children with identical faces, a boy and a girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with features so delicate they looked like they had been drawn rather than born. "My name is Maria," she said, bowing. "I would like to apply for the position, along with my children." I asked her to sit. She explained her situation with the calm efficiency of someone who had rehearsed this conversation many times. Her husband had been an A-rank adventurer, dead 4 years. He had left behind enough wealth that she hadn't needed to work, but isolation had eaten at her, and she wanted a place where she could be useful and where her children would be safe. Safe from what? I asked, though I was already looking at the twins more carefully. Maria reached over and gently pushed the hair back from her son's ear. The tip was pointed, not human pointed, elf pointed. "My children are half-elves," she said. In this world, elves were considered the most beautiful of all humanoid races, a beauty so extreme it had once been commodified. Centuries ago, elves had been captured and sold as ornamental slaves. The practice was illegal now, but the appetite hadn't disappeared. It had just gone underground, and half-elf children, with their ethereal faces and their vulnerability, were prime targets for kidnappers and traffickers. Maria needed more than a job. She needed a fortress. I looked at the twins. The girl, Tiana, met my eyes with a steady gaze that said she understood exactly why her mother was nervous. The boy, Tio, smiled at me with the open trust of a child who hadn't yet learned what the world wanted to do with his face. I hired all 3 on the spot. "I'll also provide your children with protective magic tools," I said. "Enchanted robes, barrier stones, alarm devices. Standard issue for anyone under my roof." Maria's composure cracked just for a moment. Her eyes went glassy and her hands trembled in her lap. She bowed so deeply, her forehead nearly touched the counter. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means." I had some idea. I had spent 15 years watching mothers come into the convenience store at impossible hours. Buying what their children needed with coins counted twice. I knew the mathematics of desperation. I also knew the mathematics of opportunity. Maria was connected. An A-rank adventurer's widow had social networks that reached into every corner of the capital's merchant and military communities. She was intelligent, organized, and within 2 weeks, she had restructured our shift schedule, renegotiated 3 supplier contracts, and somehow convinced the neighborhood wives to form an unofficial advertising network for our products. She was, by any measure, the best hire I had ever made. The twins became fixtures around the shop. Tio helped with inventory. Tiana swept the floors with meticulous focus. Both were quiet, obedient, and watched everything I did with the attentive eyes of children who had learned that understanding adults was a survival skill. When I gave them enchanted robes and barrier stones, Tio held his to his chest and told me he wished I were his papa. I told him that was very kind and changed the subject before my chest did something inconvenient. Joan from the orphanage had graduated to running deliveries. Rosa's sewing had improved enough that I had promoted her to head of the children's textile operation and started feeding her pattern books and fabric samples. Isabella reported that the orphanage kids were eating better, studying harder, and fighting over who got to help with the next batch of robes. Without planning it, without a single strategic memo or organizational chart, I had built something that resembled a family. The shop was growing, and growing meant new products. I stood in the back office one evening, staring at a row of sandwiches I had made for the early morning adventurer rush, and realized I was looking at the same problem I had solved 1,000 times at the convenience store: food spoilage. In Japan, we had refrigerators, preservatives, vacuum sealing. Here, they had salt and prayers, so I built a refrigerator, not the kind with a compressor and freon, the kind with enchantment magic and garbage skills. I had the blacksmith forge cooling plates infused with weak ice attribute magic. Jade helped me install them inside a walled-off section of the shop floor using adhesive mucus as bonding agent. "You are spitting on the walls of our store," she said, her face a masterpiece of revulsion. "It's a skill. The adhesive is, I don't care, die. You said that about the sign too. The sign is still holding. I want it to fall. I want everything you've ever spat on to collapse." She held the cooling plates in place while I worked, her arms straight, her face turned away, her dignity in tatters. The refrigerator was operational by midnight. Cold drinks, chilled food, temperature-stable storage for perishable goods. I also created food preservation containers, leather bags, and wooden boxes enchanted with 3 garbage skills: constant temperature, from snow-dwelling monsters that regulated their body heat; moisture retention, from desert creatures that prevented water loss through their skin; and purification, from forest spirits that kept their environment clean. Together, these 3 skills extended food shelf life by roughly 100 times. Within a week, adventurers were buying the leather bags for dungeon trips. Housewives were buying the wooden boxes for their kitchens. Maria's neighborhood network spread the word faster than any advertisement. The Cave Dwarf's magic tool shop now sold lighting stones, enchanted robes, barrier stones, alarm candies, food preservation containers, cold drinks, and hot sandwiches at 5 in the morning. I had reinvented the convenience store in a world that didn't know it needed one. The only difference was that this time, I owned it. Sage visited regularly, sometimes for research, sometimes to check inventory, sometimes because his official excuse had run out, and he simply missed me. On one of those visits, with Marceline beside him, the conversation turned to the war. The kingdom needed weapons, enchanted weapons, the kind of weapons that could shift a battlefield. Sage laid out the numbers. Frontline losses were climbing, morale was dropping, and the military was desperate for any technological edge. The implication was clear. I had the skills, the production capability, and the palace contract. All I had to do was say yes. No, I said. The word landed like a stone in still water. Sage blinked. Marceline's hand tightened on the arm of her chair. From the doorway, I heard Jade stop sweeping. I won't make weapons for Runeguard's war. Jade was the first to explode. What the hell, old man? You sat right here with Sage and talked about how to win the war. You talked about military strategy. You talked about overwhelming technological superiority. I discussed how a war could be won, I said. I never promised to help this kingdom win it. Silence. Then Jade's face shifted from anger to confusion, to something that looked uncomfortably like betrayal. I let the silence hold for a moment before continuing. I talked about the mechanics of winning a war: strategy, logistics, production capacity. That is a hypothetical discussion. At no point did I sign a document, shake a hand, or make a verbal commitment to serve as this kingdom's weapons manufacturer. Sage's expression was unreadable. Marceline's was not. She looked like a woman recalculating an entire ledger. The kingdom expelled me, I said. The king looked at my status, saw the word error, and threw me away like defective merchandise. I was cataloged, assessed, and discarded. Every summoned student was treated as inventory, sorted by value, assigned roles, deployed as assets. That is not a system I owe loyalty to. But people are dying, Jade said. Her voice had gone quiet. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something raw. She had friends among the summoned students, classmates, people she had eaten lunch with in a school that no longer existed in any world she could reach. People are dying on both sides, I said, and I don't yet know which side started this war, which side wants it to continue, or whether Runeguard winning would actually make anyone safer. I will not hand weapons to a government I don't trust and hope they use them responsibly. That is not caution. That is basic pattern recognition. Jade stared at me for a long time. The broom hung loose in her hand. I could see her processing it, turning the logic over, testing it against her feelings. She wanted to be angry. She wanted me to be the simple, reliable uncle who did the right thing because it was right. But I had just shown her a version of myself she hadn't imagined. A man who would let a kingdom bleed while he calculated. I will end the war, I said, on my terms, when I understand what I'm ending and why. Until then, I protect my people. That includes you. That includes everyone in this shop. That does not include a king who threw me in the garbage. She didn't answer. She went back to sweeping. The strokes were harder than before. Sage, to his credit, said nothing about betrayal or broken promises. He simply nodded, adjusted his oversized robe, and said, "The offer stays open, Mark, whenever you're ready." Marceline left with a handshake that was firmer than usual, but not hostile. A soldier's way of saying, "I understand. I don't agree. We'll talk again." After they left, the shop was quiet. Jade swept the same 3-meter stretch of floor for 10 minutes. I knew she was thinking. I let her think. "Old man, yes? You'd better be right. I usually am." "Shut up." The broom stroke softened. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something close to trust. A week later, I took 5 people into the multi-dungeon. Jade, Tio, Tiana, Joan, Rosa. Ages ranging from 9 to 17. Combat experience ranging from 0 to 0. Equipment, enchanted robes, barrier stones, and the deeply unearned confidence of children who believed a tired-looking shopkeeper could protect them from anything. The multi-dungeon was a network of connected mid-sized dungeons near the capital. Low difficulty, well-maintained, with paths cleared by decades of adventurer traffic and traps disarmed so thoroughly that the biggest hazard was tripping on loose gravel. Monsters regenerated regularly, but the strongest rarely exceeded C rank, perfect for training. My plan was simple, efficiency-focused, convenience store logic applied to combat education. I would clear the dangerous enemies first, then let the kids fight manageable ones under supervision, power leveling. The same principle as training a new cashier. You don't hand them the rush hour register on day one. You let them practice on the quiet shift until the motions become automatic. We entered the golem area, mineral-rich tunnels, where the dungeon generated metal-plated constructs of varying size and aggression. I walked point, the twins flanked behind me, Joan and Rosa in the middle, Jade at the rear, watching for stragglers. The first encounter was 8 aluminum-plated golems, slow, durable, dangerous in numbers. A textbook newbie killer scenario. The kids tensed. I walked into the middle of all 8 and detonated. Self-destruct, a garbage skill that converted life force and mana into an omnidirectional explosion centered on the user. At low levels, it was suicide. At my current stats, level 215, all A rank, it was a controlled demolition with minor self-inflicted bruising. 8 golems reduced to scrap metal in a single pulse. I healed the scratch with recovery magic and turned around. 5 faces stared at me, 4 in awe, 1 in exasperation. Old man, did you just blow yourself up? The skill is called self-destruct. It's very efficient. You're insane. Thank you. The training went well after that. I cleared the heavy targets. The kids practiced on the survivors. Joan swung his club with more enthusiasm than technique. Rosa cast earth magic with trembling hands and improving accuracy. The twins were naturals. Tiana's ice magic froze golems in place, while Tio's wind magic knocked them off balance. They fought in a sync that only twins possess. One starting an attack, the other finished. Jade was the revelation. Her calculator skill, which I had been training with math problems and register work, turned out to have combat applications I hadn't predicted. She read golem movements like they were inventory spreadsheets, calculating trajectories, predicting attack timing, selecting the optimal target in a group. She couldn't see behind her, and unexpected attacks from the rear still caught her off guard. But anything in her line of sight was processed, analyzed, and countered with eerie precision. A goddess's cheat skill wasted on a cashier. Except now the cashier was in a dungeon, and the calculations that had once tallied rice balls were tallying threat vectors. We camped that first night in a rocky alcove deep in the golem tunnels. The children couldn't sleep. The stone floor was cold and hard, and the silence of the dungeon pressed against them like something alive. One by one, they migrated to me. Joan first, then Rosa, then the twins. They curled against my sides and across my lap like puppies seeking warmth. "Good night, everyone," I said, wrapping my arms around as many of them as I could reach. They slept. I did not. I never did. In the quiet hours, with 4 children breathing against me and Jade keeping watch nearby, I noticed something wrong. The mineral deposits we had been passing were too abundant. The golem encounters were too sparse. The numbers didn't add up. Jade noticed it too. She looked at me across the sleeping children and said in a low voice, "The math doesn't match." She was right. Too many mineral deposits meant too many golems should have spawned. But we had encountered far fewer than expected, which meant the golems were being gathered somewhere, concentrated, grown. Something was wrong in the deep levels of this dungeon, and it was moving toward us. I woke Jade. "I'm going hunting," I said. "Keep the children here. If I'm not back by dawn, lead them out. Alone? Against whatever is down there? If I bring the children, whatever is down there becomes more dangerous, not less. 5 non-combatants in a confined space with an unknown threat. That's not a fight. That's a hostage situation." She didn't argue. She understood the logic, but her eyes said what her mouth wouldn't. "Come back. I'll be fine," I said. "You'd better be. I'll kill you if you die." I covered the children with plates of mithril I had harvested from an earlier encounter, shaping the metal through my iron blood skill, drawing it from my own bloodstream, and molding it into curved sheets that I camouflaged with sand and adhesive. A shelter disguised as a rock formation, mithril strong, invisible to anything that wasn't specifically looking. Then I walked into the dark. Deep in the dungeon, I found what had been gathering the golems, a creature called Schuberlich, one of the Demon King's 4 generals, a sentient orichalcum golem who had been concentrating the dungeon's spawning energy to create an army of high-tier golems. Dozens of mithril-class constructs surrounded him, their bodies gleaming in the tunnel light. His plan was simple: breed enough monsters to overflow the dungeon and devastate the capital. A 1-golem terrorist operation, fueled by hatred for humanity. I did not have time for a philosophical discussion about the morality of interspecies warfare. I had 4 children sleeping under a mithril blanket and a niece who had promised to kill kill me if I died. The fight lasted hours. I used everything. Self-destruct to thin the ranks. Iron blood to reshape harvested metal into weapons mid-combat. Adhesive mucus to glue golem limbs to the floor. Aging smell to corrode their joints. Skills that had been garbage in isolation became a system in combination, each one covering the weakness of another, chaining together into sequences that no golem intelligence could predict because no sane person would have designed them. Schuberlich was the hardest. Orichalcum didn't corrode. Orichalcum didn't glue. Orichalcum absorbed impacts that would have shattered steel, but orichalcum was still metal, and iron blood gave me dominion over metal, not control. The skill wasn't that refined, but enough influence to create openings, enough to slow him down while I self-destructed at point-blank range, healed, and self-destructed again. By the time I broke his core, the tunnel floor was a graveyard of shattered metal, and my clothes were more blood than fabric. Dawn was creeping into the upper tunnels when I limped back to the campsite. The children were still asleep under the mithril plates, safe, untouched. Their breathing was even, and their faces were calm in a way that only children who trust the adults around them can manage. But Jade was awake. She was sitting with her back against the rock wall, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around herself. She had been waiting all night in the dark, alone with 4 sleeping children and the knowledge that somewhere below, her uncle was fighting something that might kill him. The moment she saw me, she moved, not slowly, not carefully. She crossed the distance between us in 3 steps and hit me like a freight train. Her arms locked around my torso and her face pressed into my chest, and she held on with a force that had nothing to do with her E-rank strength. She was trembling. "You're safe," she said. Her voice shook. "You're safe, you stupid, stupid old man." I stood there, battered and bleeding and covered in golem dust, and I felt something crack open inside my chest that I had spent 35 years keeping sealed. The part of me that had worked holidays alone, eaten convenience store bentos alone, walked home at 4 in the morning alone. The part that had accepted, with the quiet finality of a man signing his own termination papers, that nobody would ever wait up for him. She was shaking, and she wouldn't let go. "I'm sorry I worried you," I said. "Shut up, just shut up." I put my arms around her, carefully, because everything hurt. She was 17 years old, and she was my niece, and she had spent all night in the dark, terrified that I wouldn't come back. Not because she couldn't survive without me. She could. She was strong enough, smart enough, capable enough. She had waited because she didn't want a world where I wasn't in it. Nobody had ever waited for me before. The children woke up. They saw me and immediately started asking excited questions about the fight. Joan wanted to know if I had blown anything up. I told him I had blown up approximately 40 things. He declared this the greatest achievement in human history. Jade let go of me. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, hard enough to leave red marks. Then, she turned to the children with a grin that was almost convincing. "All right, brats, pack it up. We're going home." We climbed out of the dungeon into morning sunlight. The children chattered. The twins walked close to each other, their shoulders touching. Joan carried Rosa's pack because hers was too heavy, though he complained about it the entire way. Jade walked beside me. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I reported the dungeon anomaly to the guild without mentioning Schuberlich by name. Let the kingdom increase their patrols. Let them wonder what had happened in the deep levels. I kept the knowledge of the Demon King's forces for myself. Another card in a hand I was building for a game whose rules I didn't yet fully understand. Back at the shop that evening, I stood behind the counter and took stock. Maria was reorganizing the display shelves with a system that was, I had to admit, better than mine. The twins were helping Joan carry delivery crates. Rosa was teaching a younger orphan how to stitch a straight seam. Jade sat on the counter, swinging her legs, pretending to read a math workbook, while actually watching everyone with the proprietary attention of someone who considered this entire operation her personal responsibility. Sage's enchantment notebook sat under the register, dog-eared, ink-stained, full. I opened it to the last page and wrote 2 words in Japanese, next phase. The convenience store worker in me never stopped. The shelves were stocked. The people were fed. The children were safe. The war was still out there, still bleeding, still waiting for me to decide what I owed and to whom. But tonight, the shop was warm, and the people in it were mine. That was enough. For now, that was enough. The next morning, I visited the Adventurers Guild for the first time in weeks. It was early. The lobby was empty, except for Shirley behind the counter, slouching with the specific boredom of someone who had been staring at an empty room since dawn. The moment she saw me, she snapped upright so fast I heard her spine crack. "Reed-san, it's been ages." "Good morning, Shirley-san." I hope you've been well. Bored out of my mind, honestly. Ever since you stopped bringing in those ridiculous herb hauls, the excitement around here dropped to zero. She leaned forward on the counter with both elbows. So, what brings you to the guild this early? I had rehearsed this conversation 3 different ways. In the end, the simplest version was best. I have a proposition for you. How would you like to come work at my shop? The words hung in the air. I watched her process them, the blink, the slight parting of her lips, the way her hands went still on the countertop. Here was my reasoning. The shop manager problem had been eating at me since Jade and Maria both declined. They had each cited the same weakness: insufficient experience in strategic business judgment. Jade knew the products and the enchantment operations cold, but she lacked confidence in the broader picture. Maria had the social networks and the instincts, but she felt her grasp of the shop's technical side was too thin. Pairing them didn't solve it. They shared the same blind spot. What I needed was a third person who could fill the gap. Someone who understood business operations from the institutional side. Someone who had spent years negotiating between vendors and clients, managing money, processing complex information under pressure. Someone exactly like a guild receptionist. Shirley had handled my ridiculous herb volumes back when I was an active adventurer. She had managed the paperwork, the quality checks, the client-side negotiations, all while running her normal reception duties in parallel. When I laid out the full picture, she told me, almost shyly, that she had an information processing skill. That explained a lot. The guild receptionist job was brutal enough that you needed a mental augmentation skill just to keep up. To be honest, she said, looking down at the empty counter, the guild has been boring since you left. She accepted on the spot. I had prepared arguments about career longevity and the limited future of reception work, but none of that was necessary. She wanted the work itself. She wanted to feel useful again. The plan was simple. Maria would handle the sales floor, customers, and the supplier network she had built. Shirley would handle planning, inventory strategy, and profit analysis. And Jade's calculator skill would serve as the final decision maker whenever the two disagreed. 3 people, 3 roles, sharing the weight that I had been carrying alone. Within 2 weeks, the system was running better than I had any right to expect. Shirley absorbed the shop's operations in a single day. By the second morning, she was making display suggestions that I had to admit were smarter than mine. By the end of the first week, she had restructured the pricing tiers on our lighting stones to increase margins without losing customers. The 3 of them fell into a rhythm that was almost musical. Maria proposed. Shirley analyzed. Jade decided. It worked because of something I hadn't anticipated. Both Maria and Shirley understood skill-based competence. Maria was the widow of an A-rank adventurer. She had watched her husband's party run on trust in each other's abilities. Shirley had spent years evaluating adventurers' claims against their actual performance. Neither woman questioned Jade's authority when Calculator produced a better answer than their instincts. They respected the skill because they understood what skills meant. I told them, as gently as I could, that I would be focusing on the factory full-time. Jade kicked the floor and wouldn't look at me. Fine, she said, but you better show your face here sometimes. This is our store, old man. You and me started it. Don't you dare forget that. I won't, I said. I'll come back to see you. That's not what I meant, you idiot. She turned red and stomped off to rearrange the barrier stones display. My niece, 17 years old, running a magic tool shop in another world, pretending she wasn't sad that her uncle was leaving. Shirley promised to protect and grow the shop until I returned. I'll be waiting, she said, and winked in a way that carried more weight than I realized at the time. Maria was the one who pulled me aside afterward and explained, with the patience of a woman teaching a child to tie his shoes, exactly what I had done. Recruiting your former personal guild receptionist to work at your private shop, she said. In this world, that is the equivalent of taking a wife. I'm sorry? 3 women, all working under your roof, one of whom is your niece, whom you've placed in the highest decision-making position. The entire neighborhood believes you've taken 3 brides, read Sama, with Jade as the legal wife. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. I strongly recommend you address this, Maria said, before it becomes irreversible. I'll take it under advisement. Wonderful. I'll be waiting for your answer as well. She smiled. It was not a comforting smile. It was the smile of a woman who had already calculated her odds and liked the result. I fled to the palace. Marceline had summoned me for the formal land transfer. The kingdom, in a bureaucratic sleight of hand, was granting me the title of honorary baron to justify giving me the factory plot. 1 generation only. No real political power, but it gave legal cover for the deal. And, more importantly, it meant the kingdom was now officially on record as having rewarded the man it had expelled. The ceremony was simple. 2 people in a room, Marceline and me. She signed the documents. I signed the documents. The quill scratched against parchment, and a kingdom that had thrown me away as worthless now needed my products badly enough to make me a lord. Irony doesn't get much sharper than that. So, Marceline said afterward, leaning back in her chair with a look I had never seen on her face before. I hear you finally decided to settle down. My blood went cold. The rumors had spread across the entire capital. The cave dwarf was taking wives, 3 of them, possibly more. The most talked about bachelor in the city, and I hadn't even known I was in the running. I attempted to explain that there had been a misunderstanding. That was when Marceline told me she had been in love with me since the day we first met. Since I had looked at her, a knight commander in full armor, and simply said, "Thank you for your hard work." She told me no one had ever said that to her before, that she had gone home that night, and, for the first time in her career, imagined what it would be like to have someone waiting for her, someone who would say welcome home and mean it. She was sitting across from me with her guard completely down, and the military formality was gone, and I realized I was looking at a woman who had spent months silently hoping and had just been told it was all a misunderstanding. "I can't commit to anyone," I said carefully. "Not yet. Not until I can guarantee the safety of every person who depends on me. The war is still out there. The children still need protection. I won't make promises I can't keep." "So you intend to grow stronger first, build your power base, and then I will come for the people who matter to me." Her eyes lit up. She had heard something in those words that I wasn't sure I had intended to put there, but I couldn't take it back because maybe I had meant it after all. She let me go with a smile that was equal parts warmth and warning. I walked the palace corridors afterward, trying to process how a man who had eaten cold rice balls alone at 4 in the morning for 15 years had accidentally become the most eligible bachelor in the kingdom. That was when I encountered Luna. She was a summoned hero I barely remembered, long hair hanging over her face like a curtain. She stepped out from behind a pillar and told me, in a trembling voice, that she had fallen in love with me because I once said, "Thank you for your purchase" to her at the convenience store register. She had been watching me ever since, every day from the shadows. She had a super acceleration skill that made her impossible to outrun or detect. She was, in the most literal sense of the word, a stalker with a cheat skill perfectly designed for stalking. I talked her into continuing to watch from the shadows rather than standing next to me. I framed it as a romantic challenge. The greater the distance, the purer the love. She bought it completely. I considered this a major strategic victory and chose not to think about the fact that an invisible woman with superhuman speed was watching me at all times. Then the real business of the day began. Kyle found me in the corridor, the hero. Blonde hair, ear piercings, the earnest face of a teenager who still believed the world rewarded honest effort. But something was different from the last time I had seen him. The easy confidence was gone. In its place was the guarded wariness of someone who had learned, the hard way, that not everyone around him was what they seemed. "Reed-san," he said, "would you join us for dinner?" The invitation was not casual. I could hear it in the way he measured each word. "Over the meal," he explained. His ally, Yuki, the cleverest among the summoned heroes, had noticed the pattern first. Classmates were skipping mandatory combat training, not randomly, in clusters, and palace officials who had previously been helpful were becoming uncooperative in ways that were too obvious, too coordinated, too deliberate to be coincidence. The culprit was a student named Drake. His cheat skill was called brainwashing. Anyone who met his eyes could be placed under his control, turned into an obedient puppet who would follow any command. Drake had been the class outcast, a troublemaker with piercings and gray hair who nobody liked. Then, overnight, he had friends. Palace officials did his bidding. People who had avoided him for years suddenly couldn't stop praising him. A boy nobody liked doesn't gain a dozen loyal followers overnight, not unless something unnatural is involved. Kyle's group had formed in response. The hero, the sword saint Tadu, the Saint Memori, the sage Yuki, and a handful of others. They held dinners together to maintain unity, shared information, watched each other's backs. But they were kids, teenagers playing political chess against an opponent who could literally rewrite the minds of anyone who looked at him wrong. "We need someone outside the palace," Kyle said, setting down his fork. "Someone they can't reach, someone who has resources and isn't afraid to use them." He was looking directly at me. I understood then why I had been invited, not for dinner, for recruitment. The hero of the kingdom, holder of the strongest cheat skill in the summoning, was asking a 35-year-old convenience store worker for help, because the convenience store worker was the only person in this entire world who understood institutional corruption from the inside. I had spent 15 years watching co-workers manipulate shift schedules, customers gaslight cashiers, and district managers sacrifice their people for quarterly numbers. Drake's brainwashing was different in scale, not in kind. The mechanism was magic instead of social pressure, but the pattern was the same: isolate, control, exploit. "I'll help," I said, but on my terms. Kyle nodded. He was smart enough not to ask what those terms were. Later, I visited Sage's research lab in the palace with Yuki. The boy had transformed himself into a woman using a custom spell he had invented called New Half Magic. That was a story I chose not to think about too carefully. What mattered was the strategic picture. Sage agreed to support the hero faction under my informal banner, though not before testing me with pointed questions about my true intentions. "What are you really planning, Mark?" Sage had said, pressing close, eyes sharp. "A factory that produces enchanted weapons on an industrial scale? Photosynthetic stones that generate unlimited magical energy? What does a convenience store worker want with that kind of power?" "Nothing special," I had said. "A high-value technician and merchant is hardly a threat to the kingdom." Sage had studied me for a long moment, then smiled. "Good answer. If you'd told me everything, I would have been disappointed. When the time comes, make me a better offer than the kingdom does, Mark. I'll be waiting." I returned to my life outside the palace walls with 2 new assets: a noble title that gave legal legitimacy to my operations, and an alliance with the heroes faction that gave me eyes inside the palace where I could never go. Neither of those was on my mind when I stood at the edge of my new land the following morning. The plot sat outside the capital walls, near a river, flat, overgrown, dotted with the crumbling remains of abandoned structures. It looked like nothing. It looked like a place the world had discarded. Perfect. I knew exactly what to do with discarded things. I bit my thumb, drew blood, and activated iron blood. Metal poured from the wound, not the thin threads I had used for shelter in the dungeon, not the emergency plates I had formed in combat. This was deliberate, structural, architectural. I-beams materialized from my fingertips and drove themselves into the earth. Cross supports locked into place with a sound like a giant cracking its knuckles. Walls of steel frame erupted from the soil in rows, in grids, in the precise rectangular layouts of a man who had spent half his life inside buildings designed for maximum operational efficiency. 3 days. That was how long the steel skeleton took. 3 days of bleeding, of visualizing, of laying metal bones across a plot of land that the kingdom had written off as wasteland. The convenience store worker in me saw the layout immediately. Building 1 for high-frequency blades, Building 2 for photosynthetic stone production, Building 3 for the shop's standard merchandise, Building 4 for food products, Building 5 for raw material processing using a homunculus system. I needed walls next, pseudo-concrete, made by mixing the local sandy soil with adhesive mucus. The mucus wasn't pretty. I had to generate it from my mouth, like a human fountain, filling barrel after barrel that I had shaped from iron blood. Jade, when she came to help with the soil collection, told me in no uncertain terms that watching me spit industrial-grade concrete was the most disgusting thing she had ever witnessed, including the Golem battle. The walls took 2 weeks. Jade, Shirley, Maria, and several shop employees rotated through to help haul soil. Joan ran deliveries between the factory site and the shop. Rosa sent encouraging letters tucked into the supply crates, each one decorated with a tiny embroidered flower. Building 5 was special. Sage helped me design a homunculus system, a creature of artificial flesh and synthetic blood, built to do one thing: absorb iron golem material through its veins, then use iron blood to generate standardized metal plates endlessly, tirelessly, without my involvement. The technology was beyond what I could have built alone. Sage's enchantment knowledge made it possible. The result was a machine that ran on the same principle as a living body. Feed it metal, it bleeds blades. Each assembly line in the other buildings ran on a skill plate system. The concept was elegant in its simplicity. Take a palm-sized metal plate, enchant it with a single skill, mount it inside a device that transferred that enchantment to any object placed beneath it. Feed magic power from photosynthetic stones. One device, one skill, infinite copies. Fidgeting became the vibration source for high-frequency blades. Landing became the auto-correction that made those blades orient themselves edge-first on impact, no matter how clumsily the wielder swung. A weapon a farmer could use like a trained knight. I had shown the prototypes to Marceline before leaving the palace. She had broken my first blade with a single casual tap and told me it was too fragile for her knights. She was absolutely right. So I redesigned the concept from the ground up, Disposable blades, thin steel plates, sharpened on 3 edges, mounted in a trigger release handle. Carry 10 blades in a sheath on your hip. When one snaps in combat, pull the trigger. The broken blade ejects. A fresh one locks in automatically. A weapon built for soldiers, not knights. Mass-produced, disposable, effective. The kind of thing a convenience store distribution center would design if someone told it to arm an army overnight. The day the first assembly line produced its first batch, I stood in Building 1 and counted 47 complete high-frequency blade sets in a single shift. More than any blacksmith in the capital could forge in a month. A man who had been gathering herbs 3 months ago was now running an industrial weapons factory. Sometimes I wondered whether the goddess would laugh or scream if she could see what I had done with her garbage. Fidgeting, landing, adhesive mucus, iron blood. Every skill she had thrown away because nobody wanted it was now the backbone of a production system that would change this world's balance of power. Production scaled fast, too fast for anyone to ignore. The factory churned out high-frequency blades, lighting stones, preservation containers, enchanted protective robes. Each product passed through quality inspection, the same kind of checks I had run on convenience store merchandise for 15 years. Temperature, texture, function. Defective items were recycled, never sold. The standard never slipped. I hired part-time workers from the surrounding neighborhoods, women whose husbands were at the front, elderly men who couldn't fight but could run a quality check station with steady hands and careful eyes. The same people the kingdom had forgotten about. I paid them fairly. I gave them barrier stones and protective equipment, and I gave them something the kingdom never had: procedures, written instructions, step-by-step checklists posted at every station. You don't need talent to follow a procedure. You need attention and care. Convenience store work had taught me that 15 years ago. Kyle's allied heroes started rotating through the factory as security guards. Young, summoned warriors with cheat skills and nothing productive to do, standing watch over the most strategically important building in the kingdom. It was a good arrangement. They got safety outside the palace. I got guards nobody in their right mind would challenge. Meanwhile, the shop hummed along without me. Jade sent daily reports via Jones delivery runs. Sales were up 11%. Customer complaints were down. The 3-person management system was holding, and more than holding. It was thriving. I read her reports at my desk in Building 1 each evening. Her handwriting was terrible. Her numerical analysis was razor sharp. Calculator was growing. She was growing. The delinquent girl who couldn't read quest boards 6 months ago was now making inventory decisions that outperformed my own. One evening, Marceline visited the factory to conduct an official inspection of the weapon output. She walked every production line, tested blade after blade, questioned workers about their procedures. When she was satisfied, she found me in my office. "I need to discuss something with you," she said, closing the door behind her. "If this is about the marriage rumors, not that, although we will discuss that eventually." She sat down across from me. "Surely, you understand that she believes you proposed to her. Maria informed me, and Maria herself expects an answer, as does Jade, whether she would die before admitting it." She folded her arms. "I'm not here to pressure you. I understand your position. You won't commit until you can protect everyone who depends on you. That's admirable. Frustrating, but admirable. Then what are you here for? To tell you that the war is getting worse. The front lines are pushing closer every month. The kingdom needs what you're building here, Reed Dono. If this factory's output doubles, it could shift the balance." She stood, walked to the door, paused with her hand on the frame. "And so do I," she said quietly. "Don't make us wait too long." She left. The factory hummed around me, steel and magic, and the sweat of ordinary people doing extraordinary work on assembly lines, designed by a man who used to stock shelves at 2 in the morning. I sat alone in my office and thought about the war I had refused to fight. The products leaving my factory were already fighting it for me. Every high-frequency blade a soldier carried into battle. Every protective robe that turned a killing blow into a bruise. Every lighting stone that let a night patrol spot the enemy before the enemy spotted them. I had told Marceline I wouldn't be the kingdom's weapon. I hadn't said anything about being their supply chain. The distinction mattered to me. Whether it mattered to history was a different question entirely. Late that night, after the last shift had gone home and the homunculus in Building 5 continued its endless, mindless production, I walked the factory floor alone. My footsteps echoed off the concrete walls I had built with my own spit. 5 buildings, dozens of production lines, hundreds of workers, thousands of products flowing outward into a world at war. 3 months ago, I had stood behind a shop counter, surrounded by my growing family, and thought that was enough. It wasn't. It was never going to be. The shop was the seed, the factory was the tree, and the tree was still growing, still reaching, still demanding more sunlight than I knew how to provide. Somewhere in the palace, Drake was building an army of puppets with stolen minds. Somewhere beyond the border, the Demon King's remaining generals were planning their next incursion. Somewhere in my shop, 3 women were running a business and waiting for a man who kept making promises he wasn't sure he could keep. I locked the factory gate behind me, checked the barrier stones along the perimeter, began the walk back toward the capital in the dark, alone, the way I had walked home from every night shift for 15 years. The war was coming to my doorstep, whether I wanted it or not. But tonight, the factory was built. The lines were running, the blades were sharp. The people who depended on me were one day safer than they had been yesterday. For a convenience store worker, that was the only metric that had ever mattered. Did today's shift leave things better than yesterday's? Today, it did. Tomorrow would have to answer for itself. The factory was running. Assembly lines hummed behind those iron blood walls, pushing out enchanted weapons and tools at a rate that would have made any convenience store distribution center proud. Maria had taken the shop. Jade was growing into something I could not quite name yet. And somewhere in the palace, Kyle had told me things about the kingdom's insides that I wished I could unhear. But none of that mattered the morning Jade asked me about chainsaws. We were sitting in the factory workshop, surrounded by prototype frames and half-finished skill plates, when she brought it up. The high-frequency blades were selling to the military, but the frontline reports had been consistent. The blades were too fragile. They snapped in heavy combat. Soldiers were losing weapons mid-fight, and some had accidentally cut allies because the vibrating edge could not be controlled in tight formations. "So fix it," Jade said, like it was obvious. "I intend to, but first, let me ask you something. What do you think is the greatest invention in human history?" She stared at me. "A phone? It's the gear." You didn't even listen to my answer. I pressed forward. The gear, a rotating disc with teeth. Simple in principle, revolutionary in practice. Force multiplication, rotational conversion, mechanization. Every machine humanity ever built traced its lineage back to interlocking wheels. And this world had never developed one. Because why would they? When magic could achieve effects directly, there was no incentive to think mechanically. Nobody needed gears when enchantment existed. But I came from a world without magic. My brain defaulted to machines. Vibration and gears, I said. Those two things together can replicate almost any mechanical device from Earth, and I already have a vibration source. Jade's eyes narrowed. Fidgeting skill. Exactly. Use fidgeting as the engine. Run it through a gear mechanism, and instead of a vibrating blade that shatters on impact, you get a chainsaw, a rotating chain of teeth, each one reinforced, each one replaceable. If it hits the anti-blade jumpsuit, the fibers catch the chain and stop it. No friendly fire, no snapping mid-combat. "You could have just said that from the start," Jade said, and punched my shoulder. I thanked her for the feedback. She called me creepy. It had been a while since she had used that word. Over the next 2 weeks, I built the first prototypes. Iron blood shaped the gear teeth with the precision this world's blacksmiths could not match. I could visualize the tolerances and produce them directly from my body's metal reserves. The gears meshed, the chains rotated, the fidgeting-powered engine whirred to life with a sound like an angry hornet trapped in a metal box. The first chainsaw cut through an orichalcum-reinforced test block like it was butter. Jade watched the demonstration with her arms crossed, trying very hard not to look impressed. She failed. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" she said. Not a question. It did. Gears meant chainsaws. Chainsaws meant engines. Engines meant vehicles. Vehicles meant a transportation revolution. Each invention cascaded from this one foundational technology, and this world had never even considered the possibility, because magic had made mechanical thinking obsolete. A convenience store worker from a world without magic had just introduced the Industrial Revolution to a civilization that ran on spells. The irony was not lost on me, but the irony was also the point. This world had spent millennia developing magic as its universal tool. They had enchantments that could heat rooms, purify water, and cut stone. Why would anyone invent a gear when a spell could do the job? Because spells require casters. Gears do not. A spell dies when the mage dies. A gear keeps turning until the metal wears. And if you power that gear with a fidgeting skill plate that never stops vibrating, you have a machine that runs without human intervention, forever. That was the real revolution. Not the chainsaw itself, the principle behind it. Machines that outlast the people who build them. Infrastructure that does not depend on any single person being alive. I had spent my whole career at the convenience store watching systems that worked because the process was bigger than any individual. The shift changed. The shelves got restocked. The register opened at 6. It did not matter who was standing behind the counter. The system ran. Now I was building that in a world that had never imagined it was possible. The factory shifted into production mode within days. New assembly lines for chainsaw-type weapons, improved jumpsuit format anti-blade armor, and the gear mechanisms that powered all of it. I designed each line with the same principles I had learned from stocking shelves at 3 in the morning. Standardize the product, systematize the process, train workers to follow procedures, quality check everything before it leaves the building. The military placed orders before the prototypes were even finalized, but I could not stay in the workshop forever. Marceline had arranged a tour of the frontier territories, ostensibly for business expansion and political networking. In truth, I needed to see what my weapons were doing on the front lines. And Jade had her own agenda. We traveled with Kyle and the Saint Memory Sophie, an odd group. The hero with his earnest convictions, the saint with her gentle healing magic, my delinquent niece who handled negotiations with territorial lords like she had been born to it, and me, the man with trash skills and dark circles that no amount of leveling could erase. The journey took us through several territories. I observed local markets, noted supply chain gaps, identified products that could flow through a future transportation network. Jade took meetings I had not arranged, spoke to officials I had not contacted. She was building her own web of connections, proving she could operate independently. The calculator skill guided her decisions with ruthless precision. She was no longer my assistant. She was becoming a leader. And the strangest part was that I had not taught her this. Calculator had given her the analytical framework, yes, but the confidence to use it in rooms full of men twice her age who did not take teenage girls seriously. That was all her. That was the delinquent who had commanded respect on the streets of Tokyo just by walking into a room and refusing to be invisible. The Marquis of Waynesvale was the most memorable stop. We stumbled into a tofu shop, being menaced by a thug working for land developers. I punched the thug in the face. The Marquis, who had been there in disguise inspecting his territory's food production, watched the whole thing and introduced himself afterward. Handsome, sharp, the kind of nobleman who actually cared about his territory rather than just taxing it. He invited us to his mansion. Business negotiations followed. Import routes for tofu, distribution network possibilities, noble patronage offers. He was thorough and he was genuine. I liked him. That would make what came later so much worse. At a frontier military base, we encountered a situation that proved my worst suspicions about the kingdom's strategic thinking. Colonel Gawain, the base commander, was planning an aggressive sortie against a gathering force of Demon King's troops. The plan was reckless. He wanted to send 80% of his garrison into offensive formation, leaving the base nearly undefended, counting on Kyle and Sophie to handle any complications. Jade saw the flaw immediately. "What if there's a second force?" she said to Kyle, flat and cold. "Your intel says the Demon King's armies don't cooperate, but the monsters around this base are behaving like they're under unified command. Something doesn't add up." Kyle argued back. He had fought them before. They were always disorganized. Jade cut through his optimism, like one of my high-frequency blades through aluminum. "So why are the regular monsters staying put instead of fleeing? If they're really enemies with the spirit-type force behind them, they'd be running. They're not. Use your head." Kyle went quiet. I intervened before it became personal, assuring him that Jade and I would stay at the base during the operation as a failsafe. If anything went wrong, we could handle it. He looked at me uncertainly and asked if I could really deal with a 4 general. "Yes," I said, "I can." He assumed I meant my magic tools. I did not correct him. The operation launched. The sortie pushed forward, and when a second enemy force struck the base exactly as Jade predicted, I stepped outside and handled it. The 4 General Ailsberg, an elder wraith commanding undead and spirit-type forces, hit the base with everything it had. A lesser force would have crumbled, but I had been waiting for a moment like this for months, not out of bloodlust, out of necessity. I had skills I had never properly tested, because no enemy had survived long enough to serve as a measuring stick. Ailsberg was SSS in both strength and magic. Perfect. I activated Calamity at 30% power. It was enough. The 4 generals' massive spectral body buckled like a puppet with its strings cut. Not dead. Not yet. Just helpless enough to be useful. "Since you're still conscious," I told it, "let me run some tests. Dark matter flechettes for range suppression, miasma clouds for area denial, cursed mud projectile systems for mid-range pressure attacks." Each combination I had theorized about during late nights in the factory, each one requiring precise timing between skills that were never designed to work together. I documented every result, measured every every reaction. The 4 generals screamed in languages I did not understand while I took notes. By the time Kyle returned with the main force, the base was secure. The field around it looked like a war zone within a war zone, littered with dissipating spectral residue and the charred remnants of undead soldiers. He stared at the aftermath with an expression I could not quite read. Not fear, not admiration, something closer to recognition, as if a puzzle piece had clicked into place in his mind. "You're not just a merchant," he said quietly. "I never claimed to be just anything," I said. The real confrontation came later, back in the capital. Jade had arranged a meeting with Marquis Roosevelt of Waynesvale, a territory lord who wanted my products and my loyalty. The Marcus was everything you would expect. Handsome, young, politically connected. He offered resources, noble patronage, commercial privileges within his territory. And then he made a proposal that stopped my heart. He wanted Jade as a concubine. In this world, that was not the insult it would be in mine. It was, by their standards, an honor. A commoner girl raised to noble status through marriage to a marquis, political security, financial comfort, a life of safety that I, with my hunched posture and dark circles and tendency to fight demons alone at 3 in the morning, could never guarantee. I refused before he finished speaking, not because I had calculated the political implications, not because I had weighed the pros and cons. I refused because something inside me, something older and more honest than strategy, said, "No, she is my niece," I said. "I will not use her for my business." Jade heard everything. Afterward, walking through the evening streets looking for a hotel, she smiled in a way that made me deeply uncomfortable, a knowing smile, the kind of smile calculator gives a person when they have seen through every layer of someone's reasoning. "Thanks, old man," she said, and looped her arm through mine. I told myself it was gratitude, nothing more. But the Marquess was not the confrontation that mattered. When we returned to the capital, Jade made a decision that shattered me. She went back to Marquis Roosevelt, alone, and she asked to become his concubine, of her own will. I found out in the Marquis's drawing room, standing 3 feet away, while the words left her mouth, and my brain simply stopped processing reality. She said it was the best outcome. She said calculator confirmed it. She said this was what would make her happiest. I recognized the logic. I recognized it because it was my logic. For months, I had been telling myself that Jade deserved someone better, someone younger, more stable, more worthy. I had been pushing her away, rejecting every signal, maintaining the boundary of uncle and niece as if it were a fortress wall, and Calculator had listened. It had processed my rejections as data. It had incorporated my behavior into its calculations, and it had delivered Jade an answer that optimized for my happiness at the expense of her own. She was sacrificing herself because I had been too afraid to be honest. I almost let it happen. That was the part that still makes me sick when I think about it. I almost let her walk into a life she did not want because I was too much of a coward to examine why it bothered me. The days that followed were the worst of my life in this world. Worse than being expelled. Worse than fighting Schuberlich alone. Because this time, the enemy was inside my own chest, and I could not punch it unconscious. Jade and I moved through the shop like ghosts playing house. She acted like an excited bride. I acted like a supportive guardian. We were both performing. We were both dying. Rosa, at the orphanage, asked me why I was not smiling anymore. Isabella, the nun, held my head against her chest and let me cry without asking why. Even the children could tell something was wrong with the old man who brought them enchanted toys and pretended everything was fine. I prepared her dress, a pearl sheen gown sewn by Rosa at the orphanage. I crafted a necklace from Elysium metal shaped into a salatree flower. A salatree, not a summer camellia, not the doomed beauty of the Heike Monogatari that I had cursed her name with at birth. The salatree means renewal, rebirth. I was trying to undo the curse I had placed on her when she was a baby, and I was a bitter, brilliant failure who thought naming his niece after impermanence was clever. The engagement ceremony was at the Grand Cathedral. I stood in her empty room and could not move. Maria found me there. She tore through every excuse I had built, every rational wall, every coward's justification. "You think you have no value?" Maria said, her voice cracking between fury and tenderness. "You think you're empty. That's why you can throw yourself into danger without flinching. Not because you're brave, because you don't think your life is worth protecting. And you've been projecting that emptiness onto Jade, telling yourself she deserves better, when the truth is you're terrified that if she stays with you, she'll eventually see what you see when you look in the mirror, I had no rebuttal. She was describing me with the accuracy of a status board. A girl who loves a man enough to sell her own happiness for his dream is standing in a cathedral right now, Maria said. Are you going to make her happy, or are you going to make her miserable? Choose. She slapped my back hard enough to sting. Go, she said, softer now. Whatever happens, I'm here when you come back. I ran. I scaled the cathedral wall. 3 stories up, there was a window left open for ventilation. My stats made the jump trivial. My hands shook anyway. Inside, the cathedral was full. Nobles in their finest. Church knights standing guard. The priest at the altar, mid-ceremony, reading from a leather-bound book. And at the front, in her pearl-sheen dress with my solitary necklace around her neck, stood Jade, next to the Marquise. I leaned over the balcony railing and screamed her name from my gut. Arisa! Every face in that cathedral turned. Hundreds of people. I did not see any of them, only her. She looked up at me. Her eyes were already red. She had been crying before I arrived, and when she saw me hanging over a church balcony like a lunatic, her face crumpled into something between fury and desperate hope. "Yuichi Oni-chan!" she screamed back. The Marquis, to his credit, handled this with grace. He proposed a duel. If I could prove my worth against the hero Kyle, the engagement would be dissolved. If I lost, it stood. I accepted. The training grounds. Sophie cast a barrier around the arena, her nose plugged with wine corks because my aging smell skill had already knocked her unconscious once during the journey, a detail that had been deeply embarrassing for both of us. Kyle stood opposite me, level 85, SSS in every stat, the hero skill, light barrier, future sight, swordsmanship trained by the kingdom's best instructors. I had a dark matter knife, a cloud of toxic fog, and the stench of a man who had worked night shifts for 13 years. The fight was fast, brutal, and absurd. I opened with Calamity, pushing his stats down. He resisted most of it. His hero skill contained more resistances than I could count, but the debuff stuck just enough to slow him by a fraction. Dark matter flechettes fired from concealed tubes inside the miasma cloud. He dodged them all, future sight. He could see attacks coming before they arrived, but he could only see threats, and a bad smell is not a threat. I closed distance. He caught my knife hand and threw me, but my hand was coated in miasma and cursed mud. His palm blistered on contact. He winced. Good. Now I understood the limits of his precognition. He saw the visible attack, not the invisible poison underneath. I attacked again. Dark matter flechettes in saturation patterns, forcing him to anchor his sword and project a light barrier. His defense was perfect, but it pinned him in place. I detonated my biggest self-destruct yet, point blank. The explosion consumed us both. When the dust cleared, his sword was at my throat. "My win," he said, but I was smiling, because while his sword was at my neck, my other hand had pressed against his chest, and from that hand, I activated a skill no precognition could predict. Aging smell, full power. The stench hit him like a physical wall, not poison, not a curse, not anything his hero resistances could block, just the overwhelming odor of a middle-aged man who had spent his best years under fluorescent lights. His eyes watered. His grip on the sword loosened for one heartbeat, and in that heartbeat, I pressed my dark matter knife against his ribs. Mutual kill, I said, at minimum. The Marquis called it. My objection was sustained. Kyle stood there for a long moment, sword lowered, face unreadable. Then he laughed. A real laugh, not a polite one. "Aging smell," he said, shaking his head. "You beat me with aging smell." "The goddess's finest garbage," I said. "The most useless skill in the entire collection. The one I had been ashamed of since the day Avril dumped it on me. The skill that made goblins flee and made Sophie pass out from a feedback loop of odor-triggered euphoria. The literal stench of a man who had given up on himself. And it had won me the most important fight of my life. Not through power, not through destiny. Through the simple biological fact that a terrible odor makes everyone flinch, and no amount of hero-class resistance can change human biology. His future sight could predict attacks. It could not predict a smell. His light barrier could block projectiles. It could not block a stench. His resistances could nullify curses, poisons, and debuffs. Aging smell was none of those things. It was just bad. Beautifully, perfectly, decisively bad. After the duel, I went to Jade. She was still in her dress, still wearing my necklace. Her eyes were red. She did not say anything at first, just stood there, looking at me, like she was afraid I would disappear if she blinked. "I'm sorry," I said, "for everything. For making you think you had to sacrifice yourself for my sake. For being so afraid of my own feelings that I let Calculator calculate you out of your own happiness." "Shut up, old man," she said. Then she hit me. Then she hugged me. Then she cried. I held her and let her cry and decided that this time I would not let go. go. For the first time since coming to this world, I was not running from something or towards something. I was just standing still, holding the person who mattered most, and letting that be enough. Jade pulled back eventually, wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing whatever was left of her makeup, sniffed hard, looked up at me with red eyes and a running nose, and the kind of expression that could break a man in half. "You're an idiot, old man," she said. "I know. Don't do this to me again." "I won't." She punched my chest one more time, for good measure, and then took my arm. We walked out of that cathedral together, back in the workshop, days later. The emotional dust had settled. Jade was back at my side, calculator sharp as ever, arm looped through mine whenever she thought she could get away with it. And Sage was screaming, not in pain, in pure, unfiltered, academic ecstasy. I had shown Sage my latest enchantment experiment. During the battle with Kyle, I had used multiple skills simultaneously in ways I had never combined before. Calamity applied through skin contact, aging smell projected at range, dark matter flechettes fired through cursed mud pressure systems. Each combination required the skills to interact with each other at a level that went beyond simple activation, and that interaction, analyzed through the calculator-derived knowledge I still carried from the transfer experiment months ago, pointed towards something I had suspected but never proven. Skills could be transferred between people, not temporarily, like when I had borrowed calculator through enchantment, permanently. By embedding a skill into an object, the object could serve as a conduit. The wielder would gain access to the skill as long as they held the item. With more refined procedures, the transfer could potentially become permanent, written directly into the recipient's status board. Sage grabbed their head and screamed again. "Do you understand what you've done?" they said, voice cracking. "This isn't just a breakthrough. This is the end of the world as we know it. If skills can be transferred, the entire power hierarchy collapses. The goddess's distribution, the natural talent system, the hero designation, all of it becomes irrelevant. Anyone can become anything." "I wouldn't go that far," I said. "I would. This changes everything, Mark. Everything." 3 ingredients had made it possible. First, my collection of garbage skills, dozens of diverse abilities that no single person should possess, providing the broadest possible sample of skill structures to analyze. Second, Sage's enchantment research, the theoretical framework for embedding magical effects into physical objects. Third, calculator's analytical precision, the ability to deconstruct skill architecture at a granular level that raw intuition could never reach. Nobody else in history had possessed all 3 simultaneously. The goddess had given me her garbage, and that garbage turned out to be the key to the most important discovery this world had ever seen. I was starting to think Avril's laziness might have been the best thing that ever happened to me. I would never tell her that. The implications cascaded. Intelligence swords that granted the wielder enhanced perception, armor that provided healing capabilities, weapons that carried debuff effects, and ultimately, the ability to arm ordinary people with extraordinary abilities. The monopoly on power held by the naturally gifted, by the goddess's chosen heroes, was broken, and I, the man with nothing but garbage, had broken it. That night, I found myself in the palace courtyard. I had been visiting more frequently, meeting with Kyle about the kingdom intrigue he had reported, sharing intelligence about the Demon King's operations that I had gathered during the frontline visit. Important work, but heavy work. The weight of discoveries, of fights won and relationships salvaged, of knowing that my factory was producing weapons for a war I had once refused to join. It sat on my shoulders like a physical load. I was staring at the garden flowers without seeing them when a voice spoke from directly in front of me. My beloved lord, are you all right?" I blinked. Standing there, materializing from what must have been a concealment skill, was a girl I recognized from the summoning ceremony, Luna, one of the heroes, and, apparently, the person who had been watching me from the shadows since the day we arrived in this world. "You promised not to appear before me," I said. I know, and I'm sorry. It's just, my beloved has been looking so sad lately, and I couldn't. I was worried, and..." She trailed off into a jumble of stammering and blushing and theatrical hand gestures. She knew about Jade. She knew about the engagement, the duel, the resolution. She knew everything because she had been watching from whatever shadow was closest, unable to look away from the man she had apparently decided was her entire world. "Why?" I asked, a simple question. "Because you were different," she said, suddenly calm. "When the goddess forgot you, when everyone else panicked or boasted or schemed, you just stood there and said thank you. And I thought, anyone who can be that kind in that moment must be someone worth following anywhere." It was absurd. It was stalker logic. It was also, somehow, the most sincere compliment I had received in this world. "You should find someone more worthy of that devotion," I said. Impossible, she said cheerfully. There's no one more worthy. I've checked. I did not have a response to that, so I just stood there in the garden with a girl who thought I was worth stalking, and for the first time in weeks, I almost laughed. Thank you, Luna, I said, for noticing. Always, she said. Always, my beloved lord. She vanished back into concealment before I could respond, but the heaviness in my chest had eased, just slightly, just enough. The man with garbage skills had invented gears, defeated the hero, discovered skill transfer, and accidentally acquired a stalker. It was, by any reasonable measure, a productive month. It was, by any reasonable measure, a productive month. Gears invented, hero defeated, skill transfer discovered, stalker acquired. A lesser man would have taken a vacation. I built a car. Well, not exactly a car. A magic-powered vehicle that looked like a four-wheeled carriage without the horses, ran on magic stones and gear-based transmission, and had a cockpit designed entirely by my 18-year-old niece, who, not so long ago, could not read a guild quest board. The idea had grown from gears. Gears enabled engines. Engines enabled transmission. Transmission enabled wheels that turned without horses pulling them. Each step followed the last with the clean logic of a supply chain. From the goddess's garbage to a functioning vehicle, the through line was almost elegant, in a way I suspected Avril would never appreciate. But the vehicle itself was not what stopped me cold. It was the cockpit. Jade had designed it. Not assisted, not contributed. Designed. The whole thing from scratch, with Shirley and Maria supporting the project while I was buried in magic circuit research. Maria was the one who told me. She caught me in the factory hallway, smiling in that way she had when she was about to deliver a compliment on someone else's behalf. The cockpit, she said. Jade worked incredibly hard on it. You should take a proper look. So I opened the driver's door and sat inside. And for a long moment, I did not speak. Steering via hydraulic linkage, no magic circuits required for the physical control, an instrument panel showing speed and remaining mana reserves, clean and readable, a drive selector bar for switching between the operator's own magic and the solar-charged magic stones mounted on the roof, accelerator and brake pedals, both circuit-controlled through transistors and resistors she had designed herself. The dual power system meant the vehicle could run for hours on stored magic alone, with the driver's own mana as backup for emergencies or night travel. Everything was where it should be. Intuitive placement, clean ergonomics, thoughtful design choices that anticipated the driver's needs before they arose. She had not just assembled components. She had designed an experience. Jade, how does the steering work? She leaned against the doorframe, trying to look casual, failing. Hydraulic, no circuits there. The gauges and the drive selector use circuits though, and so do the accelerator and brakes. Transistor-based output control for the engine power, with a resistor network for the throttle response. The girl who once yelled at me for explaining enchantment theory too slowly had just described a functional analog control system using terminology that did not exist in this world a year ago. You did well, I said. Really well. I mean, you taught me most of it, so. She scratched her cheek, embarrassed. I reached out and patted her head before I could stop myself. Okay, enough inspection and flirting, you two. Shirley clapped her hands with exaggerated energy. When are we commercializing this? The answer was soon. But first came the promotional tour. Shirley's plan, though she framed it as a marketing strategy. The truth was simpler. Jade had monopolized my attention during the frontier trip, and Shirley wanted her turn. She proposed visiting nearby cities with the vehicle, demonstrating it to potential buyers. And, oh, by the way, each trip would take about 2 weeks, and she would need my personal involvement as the company representative. Maria saw through this immediately and found it hilarious. Jade found it predictable, but did not object. I found it touching, in the way that realizing people wanted my company still surprised me after 35 years of being invisible. We took turns. Shirley first, then Maria, then Jade. 2 weeks each. Different cities, different routes. The same jaws dropping when a carriage moved without horses. By the time the third tour ended, orders had flooded in faster than the factory could produce. The magic vehicle was not just a product. It was a statement. No one else in this world had motorized transport. My factory could now move goods between territories at speeds that made horse-drawn logistics obsolete. The military applications were obvious. The civilian ones were revolutionary. And the political implications, I chose not to think about those yet. Jade had built the heart of it. The delinquent who could not read quest boards had become an engineer. I was not sure when the shift had completed, but sitting in that cockpit, surrounded by her work, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Pride, not the defensive kind I wore like armor, the genuine article, the kind a father feels, except I was her uncle and also her husband, and the world's terminology had not quite caught up with us yet. Between the vehicle's development and its commercial launch, the harder conversation came, not from Jade directly, from the silence between us, the thing I had been hiding since I first used calculator through enchantment magic. I told her on a quiet evening, just the two of us, the Soul Link enchantment, a magic circle inscribed on both our bodies that would permanently share our skills, our thoughts, our senses. Calculator would become mine to wield freely, without the time limits or the mana costs of temporary enchantment. My garbage skills would become hers. Our minds would sink through the connection, thoughts flowing between us like water through connected vessels. The cost was simple. Our souls would be bound at the root. If one of us died, the other died too. I told her everything. The theoretical basis, the practical benefits, the experiments I had already done to verify the concept. I told her why I had kept it secret. My voice was steady. My hands were not. "So, you've been hiding this," she said, "because you're afraid of getting me killed." Yes, and without it, you can't reach your full potential. That's also yes, which means you're weaker than you need to be, which means you're more likely to die in the fights that keep finding us, which means I lose you anyway. I opened my mouth, closed it. "So let me get this straight," Jade said, and her voice had that edge it got when she was about to dismantle my logic, the way I dismantled enchantment theory. "You won't link our souls because you're scared I'll die if you die. But without the link, you're more vulnerable, which makes it more likely you'll die. And if you die first, I'm supposed to just keep going, alone, in this world? Is that your idea of protecting me?" When she put it that way, my position sounded less like caution and more like cowardice. "We agreed to talk things through," she said, her voice shaking now, not with weakness, with the effort of restraining a much louder version of this speech. "We agreed no more unilateral decisions, no more deciding my future for me, and here you are, doing it again, without asking what I actually want. This is exactly the same as before, exactly the same as when you pushed me toward Roosevelt. You're still choosing my safety over my happiness, without asking me which one I prefer." That hit like a physical blow, because she was right. She had been right about the engagement too, and about Calculator's corruption, and about every moment where my instinct to protect had actually been an instinct to control. "What do you want?" I asked. "To be strong enough together that neither of us has to be afraid. To share everything, the risk, the power, the life. That's what being partners means, you stubborn old man. If you can't even trust me with that, then what was the point of any of this?" She was crying. Not the fragile kind, the angry kind, the kind that said she had been carrying this argument inside her for weeks, waiting for me to finally tell the truth so she could tear it apart. "All right," I said, "let's do it." The magic circles were inscribed on our stomachs, mirror images, drawn with a precision brush, while Jade squirmed and told me to hurry up because the bristles tickled. I drew mine using a mirror, which was considerably less romantic, but more practical. When I activated them, light bloomed from the ink and sank through our skin, past muscle, past bone, into something that had no physical location at all, into the soul. And then I felt her. Not her body, not her voice, her. The warmth of her thoughts, the stubborn shape of her emotions, the quiet, ferocious love that had survived every stupid thing I had done to push her away. It flooded through the link like sunlight through a window that had been shuttered for years. And for 2 or 3 seconds, I could not tell where I ended and she began. It was overwhelming. The emotional feedback amplified itself. My love for her made her happy, and her happiness made me happier, and the loop threatened to spiral until neither of us could function. We had to cut the connection after 3 seconds, both of us gasping like we had surfaced from deep water. "That was intense," Jade breathed, pressing her hand over her heart. "We'll need practice," I managed. We learned to control it. Short bursts at first, a few seconds of shared consciousness before the emotional feedback overwhelmed us. But those seconds were enough. With Calculator running through the link, I could analyze structures, solve equations, and model systems at a speed that made my previous work look glacial. The Soul Link was not just a power-up. It was a promise, written into the architecture of our beings. We live together, we die together. No more running from that truth. The years that followed moved fast. I built magic circuits, resistors, capacitors, diodes, and the crown jewel, the magic transistor. Each component required weeks of iteration, with Calculator cutting what should have been decades of development into months. From transistors came digital logic, From digital logic came the magic computer. From the magic computer came a network that connected every branch of Reed commerce across the entire kingdom, linked by magic wave transmission towers that functioned like cell phone infrastructure. We built radar systems that tracked high-powered entities in real time across the kingdom's borders. We built the Reed Commerce Headquarters building, a multi-story fortress of ceramic and reinforced magic alloy, with 7 underground combat arenas and a server room at the deepest level, 3 years in total. Jade grew alongside me through every month of it. She designed, she managed, she led. Shirley ran the industrial subsidiary. Maria ran the retail operations. The twins trained as warriors. The orphanage kids grew into employees and lieutenants. The empire we had built from a single magic tool shop now employed hundreds and influenced thousands. The gap between Jade and me had not closed. It had transformed. We were not teacher and student anymore. We were partners in every sense the word could hold. And then, on a perfectly ordinary afternoon, the alarms went off. The defense monitoring room lit up red. Unknown magical signatures detected by radar. Power readings beyond S-class. Velocity suggesting flight. Trajectory converging on our building with 70% confidence. I had been expecting this, not the timing, the event. The Demon King, I said to the room. She's finally come. I walked out of the headquarters alone, stood in the empty courtyard in front of the building's main entrance, waited. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of magic from the approaching signatures. They arrived from the sky, a formation of winged figures descending with military precision, led by a silver-haired girl with crimson eyes and 2 curved horns rising from her skull like a crown of bone. She was small, absurdly, impossibly small. The Demon King, ruler of the 7 demon provinces, sovereign of the magic nation that had been at war with humanity for a decade, looked like she would have trouble reaching items on a convenience store's top shelf. She wore a dark coat, trimmed in crimson and gold, like a general's uniform tailored for a child, and her silver hair caught the sunlight with an almost metallic shine. "Humph, thou detected our approach in advance? Not bad for a human," she declared, planting her hands on her hips and raising her chin so that the horns caught the light. Her voice was huge, theatrical. She spoke in archaic Japanese that would have sounded ridiculous from anyone who could not annihilate a city with a gesture. From her, it landed with the weight of absolute authority, packaged in the body of a child playing Empress. Behind her landed a tall, beautiful woman with angelic wings that spread wide enough to cast shadow over 3 soldiers. Porcelain skin, rigid posture, the expression of someone who had been personally offended by the existence of ground. "Demon King, please exercise caution," the woman said stiffly. "Anyone who pierced your concealment must be a formidable mage at minimum." That was Seraph, angel race, Violet's aide, subordinate, and, I would come to learn, the person most likely to object to every single thing I said, purely on principle. A massive beast man with a lion's mane and arms like tree trunks landed next. Leonis, one of the 4 generals, the strongest one, apparently. He said nothing, just folded his arms and watched. "I am the sovereign of the 7 demon provinces," Violet announced, releasing her concealed magical power like a dam breaking. The pressure hit me in the chest, immense. Greater than Kyle before his limit break. Greater than the 4 general I had fought on the frontier. The air itself felt heavier. "The peerless one under heaven, Violet von Eldrunt." She struck a pose, both hands on hips, chin at maximum altitude. A dozen angel-winged soldiers landed behind her in synchronized formation, their wings folding shut like closing fans. I had faced the hero in single combat. I had killed a 4 general with calamity. I had stared down a goddess and said, "Thank you for garbage." None of that prepared me for the emotional experience of a tiny girl with world-ending power, giving the most dramatic self-introduction I had ever witnessed in 2 lifetimes. I liked her immediately. "Welcome," I said, and bowed. "I am Marcus Reed, president of Reed Commerce. I have been expecting you." That surprised her. The theatrical mask slipped for half a heartbeat, replaced by genuine curiosity. "Oh, thou awaited our arrival with such composure?" Bold, for a lone human standing before the Demon King. Seraph stepped forward. "The enchanted armaments your company produces have devastated our forces. You have shifted the war's balance. We came to eliminate the source." "I understand," I said. "In your position, I would have done the same. However, I have a different proposal." I laid it out. The structured contest. 7 gates in the underground levels of the building, each defended by my best fighters. If they reached the server room at the bottom, they won, and I submitted to their demands. If my people stopped them, I won, and they heard me out. No killing on either side. Medical treatment for all combatants afterward. Seraph's response was immediate and aggressive. She wanted to level the building, destroy everything, move on. So I dropped the concealment on my own power. let them feel what lay beneath the middle-aged shopkeeper exterior. The angel soldiers flinched visibly. Seraph's hand went to her weapon. Leonis uncrossed his arms for the first time. The courtyard seemed to contract around the two magical pressures pushing against each other, mine and Violet's. Violet did not flinch. She studied me the way I studied enchantment diagrams, completely, methodically, taking in every detail. "If this is a trap," she said quietly, "I can destroy it from within, but force alone cannot protect my people, and governing requires more than power." She glanced at Seraph. "We accept." The contest lasted hours. 7 gates, 7 fights, summoned heroes with enchanted weapons against angel race elite soldiers. Each gate demonstrated something different. The first showed our fighters' individual strength. The third showed coordinated teamwork. The fifth showed our magic nullifying ceramic technology. The seventh showed that we understood logistics and medicine, because the recovery rooms were already treating Violet's soldiers before she even reached the final corridor. She noticed everything. She was not just fighting. She was being given a tour of what a potential ally could offer. By the end, only Violet and Seraph remained standing. Every soldier had been defeated. Not one had been killed. "Impressive," Violet admitted. "Your people fight well, and you do not kill." "Killing is expensive," I said. "Allies are not." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she laughed. A child's laugh, bright and sudden, and completely at odds with the cosmic power radiating from her tiny frame. It was the kind of laugh that made you forget, just for a second, that she could level mountains. "Very well, human. Thou wished for us to hear thee out. Then speak." I spoke. I told her what I had suspected since the day the kingdom tried to use me as a disposable tool, what Kyle's military briefings had hinted at, what every piece of evidence I had gathered from my intelligence network pointed toward. The human kingdom started this war, not the demons. The magic nation had been invaded 10 years ago. Violet's people had been defending their homeland against an aggressor that controlled the narrative so thoroughly that every citizen of the Runeguard kingdom believed the demons were the villains. The heroes the kingdom summoned were not saviors. They were weapons, aimed at the wrong enemy. I had worked in convenience stores long enough to know one absolute truth. There are always two sides to every customer complaint. The person screaming the loudest is not always the one who is right. Violet listened to my analysis without interruption. When I finished, she was quiet for a while. Then she confirmed it. All of it, detail by detail. The original invasion, the territory seized under false pretexts, the propaganda campaign that painted defensive actions as aggression, the decade of bloodshed that the human side called a righteous crusade. "I want peace," she said. Her voice was small now, not theatrical, not archaic, just a girl who was tired. "My people are exhausted. The provinces are struggling. Every year, more die on both sides for a war that should never have started. But I will not surrender our sovereignty. I will not allow my people to be subjugated." "Then let's end it differently," I said. "Not through victory or surrender, through making peace more profitable than war. For everyone. Economics. The same logic that had built my company from a single shop into the kingdom's largest enterprise. Not sentiment, not morality. Incentive structures that made cooperation the rational choice." That was the language she needed to hear. I could see it in her eyes, the calculation running behind the crimson irises. The moment she realized I was not an idealist, and that was exactly why this might work. But before any alliance could form, there was one more thing to settle. "I must know thy strength," Violet said, rising from her seat. The theatrical voice was back, but underneath it, something serious ran like a deep current. "Words are wind. Show me what the man of garbage skills can truly do." I understood. In this world, trust was built on demonstrated power. An ally you could not respect was an ally you could not rely on. We faced each other in the deepest arena of the Reed building, ceramic walls designed to absorb magical overflow. No audience except Seraph, standing rigid in the corner with her hand on her sword and her jaw set so tight it looked painful. Violet attacked first. Dark abyss energy poured from her small hands like a collapsing star. The air warped, light bent around the blast. The pressure alone would have flattened an A-rank adventurer into paste. She hit like a natural disaster, condensed into a body that weighed less than my niece. I activated everything. Calamity spread outward from my skin in a rolling wave of debuffs. Plague aura, cursed mud generating dark matter barriers, miasma thickening the air into a toxic soup that ate at magical coherence. Each skill was garbage individually. Together, layered and refined through years of use and calculator optimization, they created a killing field where raw power alone was not enough. Her blast hit my defenses and scattered, not deflected, degraded. The debuffs eroded the attack's structure from every angle, stripping its potency before it could reach me. Violet's eyes went wide. "What manner of sorcery is this?" she breathed. "The kind nobody wanted." I said. The goddess's leftovers. She came again, faster, harder. Abyss energy combined with spatial compression, the air itself collapsing inward like a crushing fist from every direction simultaneously. I countered with iron blood armor coating my body in living metal, dark matter flechettes fired from blood-generated launchers, positioned by night vision's spatial awareness, and a full calamity debuff field that turned the arena floor into a swamp of weakening effects, so thick they were visible as a dark haze. We traded blows for minutes that felt like hours. Her power exceeded anything I had ever faced, but my debuffs accumulated. Each exchange cost her a fraction more efficiency. Each second she spent inside my field ate at her offensive output like acid on silk. She gathered everything for one final strike. Abyss energy swirled into a point of absolute darkness above her outstretched palm, dense enough to distort gravity in its vicinity. The air screamed. The ceramic walls groaned. Seraph took a step backward, despite herself. I watched it come. This compressed darkness, this apocalyptic attack from a girl who looked like she should be in elementary school, eating lunch under a cherry tree. And something stirred inside me. Not fear, not calculation. Something older than both. Something from a fluorescent-lit convenience store at 2 in the morning when the automatic doors chimed and a customer walked in, and my body moved before my brain caught up because the response had been drilled into my muscles through 10,000 repetitions across 10,000 graveyard shifts. Violet's attack descended. I stepped forward into its path, activated every defensive skill I had, felt them stack and interlock like a wall built from garbage, and said the only words that felt right. Welcome. The word hung in the air between us, a convenience store greeting. Irashaimase. The phrase I had said 10,000 times to 10,000 strangers who never once looked me in the eyes. The most meaningless phrase in the Japanese language, delivered at the most meaningful moment of my second life. Violet's attack hit my layered defenses and held. The abyss energy pressed inward, compressing, screaming, trying to break through. Calamity was eroding it. Iron blood was absorbing what leaked through. Dark matter was redistributing the overflow across my barrier network, and I was standing in the center of it all, bleeding from the nose, bleeding from the ears, grinning like an idiot because the words had come out exactly right, and I did not know why, but I knew they were true. Welcome. Welcome to my store. Welcome to my world. Welcome to the part of the story where the convenience store worker stops pretending he does not matter. The energy dissipated. The arena went quiet. Violet stood across from me, breathing hard, her small shoulders heaving. I stood across from her, blood running down my chin. My defenses cracked in 7 places, but not broken. Neither of us had won. Neither of us had lost, which was, I suspected, exactly the outcome both of us had needed. Thou art truly strange, Violet said at last. She wiped sweat from her brow with the back of a tiny hand. What manner of fool greets an apocalyptic attack with the words of a shopkeeper? The manner of fool who used to be one, I said. She stared at me. Then she laughed again. That bright, sudden, impossible laugh that had no business coming from the ruler of 7 demon provinces. The kind of laugh that meant she had understood something about me that I had not yet understood about myself. I like thee, Marcus Reed. Very well. Let us build this piece of thine. Seraph looked like she had swallowed a live eel, but she said nothing. When your sovereign laughs like that at a man who just tanked her strongest attack with a convenience store greeting, there is really nothing left to say. I offered them rooms, food, medical treatment for the soldiers who were already being healed upstairs. Violet accepted with the theatrical grace of a monarch and the appetite of a child who had skipped lunch. Seraph accepted with the expression of someone signing a treaty at gunpoint and spent the entire dinner standing behind Violet's chair with her hand resting on her sword. That night, I sat in my office, alone. The Demon King was sleeping 3 floors below me. Her angel-winged subordinate was almost certainly standing guard outside the door with a naked blade. And somewhere on the floor above, my wife was waiting to hear how the day had gone. The convenience store worker, who had been given garbage by a lazy goddess, had just fought the Demon King to a standstill, learned that everything the kingdom told him about the war was a lie, and begun an alliance that could end a decade of bloodshed. I opened a drawer, took out a pen, and began writing the first draft of a peace proposal. Some habits die hard. Even when the world is falling apart, somebody has to do the paperwork. Might as well be the man who spent 10 years doing everyone else's inventory, counts at 3 in the morning. The pen scratched against paper. Outside, the wind had died. Somewhere in the building, a child-sized Demon King was sleeping peacefully for the first time in enemy territory because a garbage skill shopkeeper had looked at the most powerful being she had ever fought and said the only thing he knew how to say. Welcome. The alliance with Violet changed everything, not because a demon king believed in me, because for the first time, I had proof that the people running this war were liars, and the people they called monsters were not. Within weeks of our agreement, reports arrived at Reed Commerce headquarters. Violet's realm was fracturing. Rebel factions inside the demon territories had seized a key fortress near the Great Forest Autonomous Region, cutting supply lines and threatening to march on human lands. If they did, the fragile peace I was trying to build would shatter before it began. Every kingdom general who wanted war would get their excuse. Every diplomat who argued for negotiation would be silenced. Violet needed to reunify her side before any peace talks could happen, and I needed a stable demon realm to negotiate with. So when the request came, I did not hesitate. Violet could not pacify her own rebels without weakening her forces against the human kingdoms. I could not negotiate peace with a fractured demon realm. Our interests aligned perfectly, which is the only foundation for an alliance that actually lasts. I assembled a small strike team, not an army, not a battalion, 4 people. Luna, whose concealment skill had kept her invisible to even military-grade detection systems until my high-precision magic sensors had finally caught her lurking around Reed Commerce headquarters. The others had been furious when they discovered I had been aware of my stalker for months without telling anyone. Jade had called me the worst. She was probably right, but Luna's abilities were exactly what I needed for infiltration work. Tiana, whom the adventurer circles had begun calling the Ice Princess. Tio, her twin brother, known as the Wind Emperor. Maria's half-elf children, the ones I had trained in the multi-dungeon when they were still small enough to hide behind their mother's skirt. They were not small anymore. They fought as one creature with 2 bodies, finishing each other's sentences, covering each other's blind spots. Their intelligent swords hummed with enchantments I had spent weeks perfecting. 4 of us would infiltrate the rebel fortress, while Violet led a diversionary force from the front. We traveled through the Great Forest in our armored vehicles, passing through the territory of the Va tribe, a goblin clan I had befriended on our way to the Demon King's castle. Govagova, their chief, waved us through with a grin that showed every tooth. Strong ones recognize strong ones, he had said, and he was right. By nightfall, we reached the Demon King's fortress. Violet herself came out to greet us at the gate. She did not waste time with pleasantries. The rebels had accelerated their timeline, she explained. 2 days, maybe less, before they launched their offensive. We could not wait for the main force to arrive. Someone needed to sabotage the fortress from inside, destroy their supplies, wreck their war machines, and buy time. "Can you do it?" she asked. I looked at my team. Luna nodded, quiet and certain. The twins exchanged a glance and said nothing. They did not need to. "We can do it," I said. The plan was straightforward. Violet would lead her soldiers in a frontal display of force, not an attack, a statement. She launched a darkness spell into the sky that blotted out the sun itself. The rebels scrambled to their walls, piling defenses toward the one direction that terrified them most, which left the opposite side almost empty. We moved in stealth cloaks, devices I had developed that bent ambient light around the wearer, not perfect invisibility, more like a smear in the air, a shimmer that could be missed if you were not looking for it. At the speeds we traveled, no one was looking. Tiana and Tio went over the wall first, vertical stone, 2 stories high. They ran up it like it was a staircase. The guards on top never got a chance to raise the alarm. Tiana's ice froze them where they stood. Tio's wind cut the signal horns from their posts. Clean, silent, precise. Then they went loud. The twins tore through the fortress interior, a controlled storm of ice and wind. Their job was chaos. Draw defenders inward, away from the supply rooms and armories. They were not trying to win. They were trying to be the most dangerous distraction in the building. And in their wake, Luna and I slipped through the gaps. We coordinated through short-range magic communication devices, another one of my inventions, like radios, but powered by enchanted crystals instead of electronics. Violet's voice came through with a slight distortion, confirming the diversion was holding. "The main gate is yours," she said. "Do what you must, what I must." I thought of the convenience store, of inventory management, of knowing exactly which shelf needed restocking before the morning rush. Sabotage was not so different. Walk the aisles, identify what matters, remove it. We destroyed food stores first. Grain reserves that would have fed the rebel garrison for weeks went up in smoke. Then the siege weapons. I dismantled the mechanisms of catapults and ballistas with the precision of a man who understood gears better than anyone alive in this world, because I had invented them. Luna handled the sentries, appearing from nowhere to strike and vanishing before they could cry out. The communication device crackled in my ear. Tiana reported all clear on the eastern corridor. Tio confirmed the armory was in chaos. When we found the underground laboratory where Metadovan, the rebel leader, had been growing his homunculi, my stomach turned. Rows of half-formed bodies hung on the walls like coats in a closet, each one grown from stolen biological material, each one a puppet waiting for strings. I filled the entire chamber with cursed mud. The vats cracked, the bodies dissolved. 10 seconds and a lifetime of Metadovan's work became sludge on the floor. His combat homunculus caught us on the way out. A massive thing, muscle and bone arranged in wrong proportions, arms too long, torso too narrow. It was built for one purpose. Luna engaged while I shielded her with cursed barriers. The creature shrugged off her blades. Its regeneration was obscene. Cut it, and it healed. Throw it, and it bounced back. So she improvised, grabbed a chunk of rubble the size of a man's torso, planted her feet, and channeled every drop of her acceleration skill into one throw. The impact sounded like a building collapsing, because part of one did. "My win," she said, breathing hard, covered in dust, her school uniform torn at the shoulder, and then, softer, with that look she always got when she forgot to be embarrassed. "Did I do well, my lord?" "You did well," I said, and I meant it. We pulled out clean. 2 days later, the main Reed Commerce Force arrived. 300 enchanted cannons, armored vehicles, non-lethal ordnance designed specifically for suppression rather than slaughter, because Violet had asked us to spare her people, even the rebels. The siege lasted hours, not days. Our cannons had a range of 10 kilometers. Their catapults could barely manage one. They never touched us. When the walls fell, most of the rebel soldiers surrendered on the spot. Violet and I walked into the fortress together to deal with Metadovan personally. His final weapon, a monstrous homunculus powered by his own hatred, gave even her trouble. Its physical stats matched or exceeded hers. But hatred is not an unlimited resource. Not when someone forces you to look at what it is actually costing you. Metadovan had built this weapon from grief, from the memory of his people, the Mediterranean race, who had been wiped out by humans generations ago. His anger was real. His pain was legitimate. I understood that better than he probably expected. But I had walked through the great forest with Govagova's goblins. I had eaten their food and drunk their goat milk wine and listened to their chief talk about how his ancestors had learned to farm, to build, to dream of something better than survival. Those goblins were living proof that tomorrow could be worth fighting for. So I told Metadovan the truth, with my fist buried in his monster's chest and cursed energy crackling between us. That the goblins dreamed of tomorrow the same way his lost people once had. That crushing those dreams made him no different from the humans he despised. That his people's memory deserved better than becoming fuel for a weapon. His resolve cracked. The monster's energy sputtered like a candle in wind. Violet, who had been concentrating her magic behind me, channeled everything she had through my cursed fist. Light and darkness and raw magical force, wrapped in a shell of my own cursed energy to bypass the homunculus's resistance. The thing came apart like wet paper. Metadovan fell to his knees in the wreckage. He did not look angry anymore. He looked tired, the kind of tired I recognized from the mirror. The rebellion was over, but the kingdom's problems were just beginning. Sophie found me 3 days after the fortress fell. She appeared at our forward camp without announcement, still wearing her school uniform beneath a traveling cloak, her hair tied back in that same practical style she had worn since the summoning ceremony. "I am not going back," she said. No preamble, no negotiation, just a quiet girl drawing a line in the sand. Sophie was the saint, one of the 4 core members of the hero's party, possessing healing and barrier magic that the kingdom considered a national asset. Her disappearance had already triggered a formal inquiry. RuneGuard had sent official letters asking if Reed Commerce had any knowledge of the missing saint's whereabouts. I had written back saying we had not found her yet. This was technically true. She had found us. "The kingdom has been searching for you," I said. "I know. Kyle is worried." She looked down. "I know that too, but I cannot stay there anymore. Not with what Drake is doing. Not with how the palace pretends it is not happening." Drake, the name I had been hearing in whispers for months. A summoned hero with the brainwashing skill, who had slipped the kingdom's leash and begun building his own network of control across neighboring nations. The kingdom knew. They were doing nothing. Sophie told me everything. How Drake had taken several classmates under his skill's influence. How the palace had quietly covered up early incidents because punishing a hero would be politically inconvenient. How the corruption had metastasized while the officials debated procedure. "I could not heal people for a kingdom that refuses to stop the ones causing the wounds," she said. I understood that logic perfectly. A convenience store worker knows what it looks like when management ignores a problem until the whole shift pays for it. Then stay, I said. She cried, quietly, the way someone cries when they have been holding it together for months and finally find a place where they do not have to. Thank you, Marcus-san. I told her the truth, that the kingdom would come asking eventually, that I would handle it, that Kyle, who was steadily building political influence within the royal court, would be our ally when the time came to negotiate her status openly. Until then, she was under Reed Commerce's protection. I would deal with the political fallout later. I had gotten good at that. Some people would call what she did betrayal, a summoned saint, abandoning the kingdom that needed her healing powers, walking away from her duty. But I had walked away from the kingdom too. I had walked away from the hero, from the palace, from the entire system that had treated me like garbage and expected gratitude in return. And every step I took away from that system brought me closer to the people who actually needed me. Sophie had done the same thing. A chosen hero looked at the system that chose her, saw what it was willing to tolerate, and chose someone else. While the fortress operation consumed the headlines, a quieter war was being fought in training grounds and open fields. A war the twins had been preparing for their entire lives. Tiana and Tio faced Seraph in a formal challenge. Seraph, Violet's most powerful subordinate, an angel race woman with wings of white light and enough magical firepower to level a city block. The twins were there to prove that Reed Commerce's warriors could stand against the demon realm's elite. They opened strong. Tiana's ice magic froze the ground beneath Seraph's feet, disrupting her movement. Tio closed the distance in a blink, his wind attribute intelligence sword humming as it swung. These were not the vulnerable half-elf children who had needed protecting in a dungeon. These were the Ice Princess and the Wind Emperor, adventurers with titles, warriors with weapons I had built. The intelligence swords were my proudest creation, blades embedded with skill transfer enchantments that announced activation sequences, provided tactical data, and amplified elemental effects. Not true artificial intelligence, but enough situational awareness to turn a good fighter into a devastating one. Tiana's sword froze everything it touched. When she slashed Seraph's gauntlet, ice crawled up the angel's arm in seconds. Seraph could not afford to block anymore. She had to dodge everything. Tio's sword cut the air itself. Wind blades followed every swing, invisible razors that found flesh, even when the physical edge missed. Seraph took cuts across her entire body just from being in range. For a moment, it looked like they might actually win. Then, Seraph removed her ring. Black energy poured from her wings, staining them dark. She had been sealed. The ring suppressed her true nature, a dual attribute fighter, wielding both light and darkness. Violet's consideration for her subordinate's shame turned into a tactical restraint. Without it, Seraph was something else entirely. Her speed doubled. Her dark gauntlets shattered ice on contact, nullified the wind blades. She pushed both twins back with raw force, closing distances they could not maintain. "Is this all you have?" she said. The twins did not answer with words. They answered with coordination. Tiana feinted left. Tio swept right. Ice and wind merged into a single storm that crashed towards Seraph like a tidal wave. Seraph burned through two of her own defenses to survive it. But survive it, she did. And when the storm cleared, her counterattack, a fusion of light and darkness she called Chaos Impact, was already launched. I stepped in before it landed. The magic dissolved against my palm like mist. "Winner." "Seraph," I said. The twins looked at me with those beautiful half-elf faces, disappointed but not defeated. "Sorry, Papa," Tiana said. "We lost," Tio said. I pulled them both close. "You pushed her so hard she had to remove her seal. That is not losing. That is making the strongest warrior in the demon army fight for real." They smiled, small smiles, the kind that meant they would train harder tomorrow. Maria had told them, apparently, that persistence was the key to winning me over. I chose not to ask whether she meant in combat or in other matters. Some questions are better left unanswered. Joan fought Seraph next, wielding the mechanism sword I had designed. 5 blades in one. The fight was brutal and beautiful. Joan won, barely, by splitting the weapon into its component swords and overwhelming Seraph with versatility she could not predict. Marceline fought Leonis, the Beastman general, and lost despite landing a lightning pile bunker directly to his stomach. Every fight proved the same thing. Reed Commerce's people could stand on the same battlefield as the demon realm's finest. My technology, my training, my years of investing in people rather than hoarding power for myself. It worked. Joan wielding 5 swords at once. Marceline taking a hit that would have killed any normal knight and getting back up to shake the hand of the man who beat her. The twins forcing the strongest angel in the demon army to fight at full power. It worked even when I was not there to supervise it. That was the point. That had always been the point. A convenience store runs on systems, not on the manager standing over every employee's shoulder. I was building an organization, not a cult of personality. If I disappeared tomorrow, the weapons would still work. The fighters would still fight. The enchantments would still hold. After the rebellion was crushed and the political dust had settled, I asked Shirley if she wanted to visit her mother. She stared at me for 3 full seconds before answering. "You remembered?" she said. Of course I remembered. Shirley had been one of the first people in this world to see me as something other than a nuisance. The guild receptionist who called me her ideal adventurer, who leaned forward with genuine enthusiasm when she praised my manners and dedication. She had cried once when I told her I was leaving the adventuring life to open a shop. Her mother, Sierra, lived in a rural settlement a day's ride from the capital. Shirley had not visited in months. The war, the work, the constant demands of supporting an organization that had grown from a magic tool shop into a military-industrial power. There had never been time. I made time. We took one of the armored vehicles, just the two of us. Shirley spent the first hour of the drive telling me about her childhood, the farm where she grew up, the neighbor's dog that used to steal eggs, her mother's bread, which she insisted was the best in the kingdom and would accept no debate on the matter. Sierra met us at the door of a small stone house surrounded by wildflowers. She was an older woman with Shirley's same warm eyes and the kind of weathered hands that came from a lifetime of honest work. She hugged her daughter for a long time. Neither of them said anything. They did not need to. I stood back and watched, and something in my chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with combat damage. I never had this. My parents had been gone for years. My sister had her own family. The closest thing I had to a homecoming was clocking in for another graveyard shift and having the manager grunt at me. So watching Shirley bury her face in her mother's shoulder, watching this old woman's hands tremble as she held her child, it hit somewhere I did not have armor for. Then Sierra looked at me, really looked at me. The messy hair, the dark circles, the permanent slouch of a man who had spent too many years behind a register. "So you are the one," she said. "I am just a shopkeeper," I said. "No," she said. "You are the one who made my daughter smile again." She invited us inside. The bread was, in fact, excellent. I told Shirley she had been right. She said she told me so, with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had waited a long time for that particular validation. Over tea, Sierra told me that Shirley had changed, that she was happier, more confident, more willing to speak her mind, that the letters she sent home had shifted from dutiful reports to excited stories about what she was building. "Take care of her," Sierra said, when Shirley had stepped out to fetch water from the well. "I will. I mean it. She is my only child." "I know," I said, "and I promise." She studied my face. Whatever she found there satisfied her because she nodded once and poured me more tea. On the drive home, Shirley fell asleep in the passenger seat, her head tilted against the window, her breathing slow and steady. The setting sun turned the landscape golden through the windshield. I thought about what I was fighting for, not territory, not politics, not the grand chessboard of kingdoms and demon realms and corrupted heroes. This, the quiet happiness of people who trusted me, the bread that tasted like home, a mother's blessing, a daughter's peaceful sleep. The rebellion was over. Sophie had brought me everything I needed to know about Drake's crimes. The twins had proven themselves as warriors. My technology was reshaping the battlefield. But right then, driving through the fading light with Shirley asleep beside me, none of that mattered as much as the simple promise I had made to an old woman in a stone house. Take care of her. I would take care of all of them. That was the job. That had always been the job. The war with the demon realm was over. Drake's was just beginning. Within days of returning from Sierra's settlement, reports flooded into Reed Commerce headquarters from every direction. Drake had stopped pretending. His brainwashing skill, which the kingdom had quietly ignored for months, had evolved into something far worse. Complete domination, they were calling it now. Not mere influence. Total control over the mind and body, with an added horror that made my stomach turn. Every experience point, every skill, every fragment of power gained by his victims flowed directly back to him. He had taken the Bahamut's principality first, an entire nation, from its ruling family to its soldiers, converted into puppets. Then he turned them outward. A Deltan kingdom fell. Sidarkan kingdom followed. Their armies marched not of their own will, but under Drake's command. 3 nations weaponized against each other and against Runeguard, all to feed one man's hunger for conflict. Sophie's intelligence had given us the outline, but the full picture was worse than anyone imagined. I assembled the evidence in a briefing room at our Great Forest headquarters. Sage's research team had tracked the skill's evolution through captured subjects. Medidovan's intelligence network inside the demon territories had confirmed the cross-border scope. Marceline's military contacts in Runeguard had finally, reluctantly, shared classified reports they should have released months ago. The kingdom had known, not everything, but enough. They had known Drake was brainwashing classmates back when we were all still in Runeguard, before anyone had even heard of Reed Commerce. They had covered it up because punishing a summoned hero was politically inconvenient. One rotten apple, they reasoned, was worth tolerating if it kept the other heroes compliant and the war effort on track. That calculation had cost thousands of lives across 3 nations. I laid it all out for the War Council. Sage ran the numbers. His small frame trembled with the kind of quiet fury that only manifests in someone who truly understands data. The magic reserves Drake was draining, the skill evolution patterns, the projected timeline for when his power would exceed even our ability to counter. The room went silent. Not the silence of shock, the silence of people who had suspected the truth and were now being forced to look at it without flinching. Drake had brainwashed classmates, corrupted officials in 3 nations, stolen skills and experience from tens of thousands of controlled citizens. His own status board, which we reconstructed from captured intelligence, read level 487, all stats, SSSS+, skill slot, error. That last part caught my attention. I had only seen error in one other place, my own status board. The difference was that mine came from dozens of garbage skills stacking over months of honest work. His came from draining the lives of everyone under his control. The question was not whether he was guilty. The evidence was beyond dispute. The question was what to do with him after we won, because we would win. That part was not in doubt. Kyle came to me the night before we launched the campaign against the Bahamut's capital. He found me in my quarters, reviewing supply manifests on a communication device, cross-referencing troop positions with Violet's latest dispatches. He stood in the doorway and said nothing for a long time. I let him take his time. Some conversations need silence before they can begin. Is there any way to save him? 5 words. The weight of the world in each one. I set the device down, not because I was surprised, because I had been waiting for this question since the day Sophie told me about Drake's crimes. Kyle was the hero. Saving people was not just his skill. It was his identity, his purpose, the foundation on which he had built every decision since the goddess put a sword in his hand. And now he was standing in front of me, asking if the one person who could not be saved might somehow be saved anyway. No, I said, you did not even think about it. I have been thinking about it for months, Kyle. Every angle, every contingency. The answer has not changed. He stepped inside and sat down across from me. The confident posture was still there, the clear eyes, the earnest face that had never known true failure. But something underneath had cracked. He looked like a student who had studied hard for an exam and just been told the subject had been canceled entirely. What if we fake his death? He said. We could imprison him somewhere isolated, strip his powers somehow, keep him contained where he cannot hurt anyone. And when he escapes, because he will, his skill evolves, Kyle. It has already gone from brainwashing to complete domination. Every prison requires guards, and every guard becomes a potential victim. The day he breaks free, and he will break free, the blood of everyone he hurts afterward is on our hands. Yours, mine. Everyone who chose the comfortable lie over the hard truth. He absorbed that, tried another angle. His voice did not waver, but his hands were clasped so tight, his knuckles were white. Exile then. Send him somewhere so remote that even if he uses his power, there is no one to control. The edge of the demon realm, an uninhabited island, somewhere. A monster loose in the world is still a monster. An exile does not satisfy the victims. 3 nations worth of people who lost family members, who were forced to fight and kill against their will, who watched their own bodies commit atrocities while their minds screamed. They need justice they can see and understand. Anything less creates political instability that will undo every peace agreement we are trying to build. Everything we have fought for, everything the twins bled for, everything Violet sacrificed, all of it undone because we chose mercy for one person over justice for thousands. And if Reed Commerce shelters him, then every employee of mine becomes a target for every victim seeking revenge. Shirley, Maria, the twins, Jade, Joan, Luna, Sage, every person in this building who trusts me to keep them safe. I will not make them pay for his crimes. That one hit hardest. I watched Kyle's face change. The idealism was still there, but but reality was carving lines into it, the way water carves stone, not fast, not dramatic, just inevitable. He was our classmate, Reed-san, I know. We sat in the same classroom. He was a delinquent, sure, violent, reckless, but he was 17 years old. He was still a kid. He was a kid who chose to enslave 3 nations, not because he was desperate, not because he was threatened, not because he was cornered, because he enjoyed it. I paused. Let the words settle. Jade told me about him from their school days. Even before the summoning, he was rational about his violence. He manufactured enemies so he could have someone to fight. He created conflict on purpose, then positioned himself at the center of it. The summoning did not change who he was. It just gave him the scale to do what he had always wanted to do. Kyle said nothing. His death is not my judgment, I said. It is the consequence of his choices. Every step of this road, he chose. He could have stopped at any point. He did not want to. The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled taut. Outside the window, the great forest stirred in the night wind. Somewhere below, Reed Commerce employees were loading supplies onto armored vehicles for tomorrow's march. I hate this, Kyle said, finally. So do I. You do not look like you hate it. I spent 15 years at a convenience store, watching management ignore problems until they exploded. A customer who steals from the register does not stop because you ask nicely. A coworker who harasses the night shift does not change because HR sends a memo. Some problems can only be solved by removing the person causing them. I learned that truth when I was younger than you are now. I did not enjoy learning it then. I do not enjoy applying it now. But pretending it is not true has never, in the entire history of problems, made a single one go away. Kyle stood up. His eyes were red, but his voice was steady. Then, I will do it. I will face him, give him a chance to surrender, and if he refuses, I will end it myself. You do not have to carry this alone. I will be there beside you, half the burden, half the responsibility. He managed something that was almost a smile. Almost. You always say that. Because it is always true. He left. The room felt heavier after he was gone. I sat with the supply manifests and did not read a single line for 20 minutes. My mind kept circling back to the same place. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being right about something you desperately wish you were wrong about. In the convenience store, we called it inventory shrinkage. You know a product is being stolen. You know who is doing it. You report it. Management does nothing. The theft continues. The loss accumulates. And when they finally act, they act too late, and the damage is already done. Drake was the kingdom's inventory shrinkage, and I was the night shift worker who had seen it happening from the start. We marched on Baramets within the week. The campaign itself was methodical rather than dramatic. Reed Commerce's defense force, equipped with enchanted cannons, non-lethal restraint ordnance, and armored vehicles, pushed through Drake's brainwashed armies with surgical precision. We were not there to conquer. We were there to liberate. Kyle and the remaining summoned heroes took point on persuading controlled classmates. Nomura, with his skill mimicry, went down when Kyle overpowered him with raw stats, and I locked him in dark matter restraints. He had been crying even while fighting. His body moved under Drake's control, but his eyes were screaming for it to stop. Kanzaki, holding a grudge over Kyle's fiancée, accidentally knocked himself unconscious with his own instant death magic after I pointed out the logical impossibility of his romantic strategy. Even in war, some people find ways to be absurd. The brainwashed soldiers, when confronted with 300 enchanted cannons on the horizon, surrendered in waves. Drake's control could compel obedience, but it could not manufacture courage. The strings snapped faster than their controller could pull them. When we reached the Baramets capital, the city was empty. Every civilian, every soldier, every living soul had been evacuated. I scanned the city with our most advanced observation equipment. Not a single life sign except one. A massive magical presence sitting in the throne room of the central castle, radiating fighting spirit like a bonfire, radiates heat. He had cleared the city so Kyle could fight at full power without worrying about collateral damage. I understood then what Jade had meant when she described the boy she remembered from school. Fighting was not Drake's means. It was his entire purpose. The nations he conquered, the armies he controlled, the chaos he orchestrated, all of it was stage setting for this single moment. A throne room, a hero, the battle he had been dreaming about since the day he arrived in this world. We entered the throne room together. Kyle pushed the doors open, and there he was. Drake was sitting on the throne like a child playing king, legs thrown over one arm of the chair, body slouched sideways, one hand supporting his chin. He was grinning, the grin of someone who had been waiting for this moment, the way a child waits for a birthday party. He called out to Kyle first. Then he noticed me, dismissed me as the extra old man, irrelevant, background noise. Good. I have built an entire career on being underestimated. Kyle asked him why. Why do this? Why conquer nations, enslave thousands, start wars that killed people who had never done anything to him? Drake's answer was the most honest thing I had heard from anyone in months. The world had always been gray to him, he said. Empty, meaningless, every day identical to the last, every interaction hollow, except when he was fighting. In those moments, when fists connected and blood flowed and his life was genuinely at risk, the gray turned to color. Violence was the only thing that made him feel alive. Back on Earth, he had run out of worthy opponents. Here, in a world of levels and stats, he had found the ultimate playground. And when he learned about the hero's role, fighting the Demon King, the final boss of the story, he wanted that role for himself. Not out of ideology, not out of revenge, out of pure, simple hunger. He wanted to be the enemy the hero was built to defeat. He wanted the climactic battle, the clash that would justify every moment of emptiness that came before it. Then he showed us his status board, and even I was stunned. Level 487, all stats, SSS+, skill, error. The accumulated experience and power of tens of thousands of dominated people, all compressed into one teenage body. The fight shattered the castle. Kyle and Drake clashed with forces that turned city blocks into craters. Their attacks crossed in the air, detonating buildings in chain reactions of light and destruction. Drake's stolen techniques gave him a library of combat styles. Kyle's hero skill pushed his stats to their absolute ceiling, sword wrapped in light, flame, healing, and fighting spirit simultaneously. I waited, watched, analyzed. The irrelevant old man in the corner, running calculations the way I used to inventory product shelves at 3 in the morning. Drake favored his right side after charging attacks. His stolen combat skills were powerful, but disconnected, like a fighter who had memorized 100 textbooks, but never trained his body to flow between styles. And his confidence in his raw stats made him sloppy with defense. When the moment came, when Drake locked Kyle in a clash of strength that neither could break, their blows generating shockwaves that leveled buildings a block away, I struck from the angle Drake had already forgotten about. The irrelevant old man, miasma, cursed mud, debuffs that operated outside the magic system entirely, anomalies the stolen skills in Drake's arsenal had no answer for because they predated the skill system itself. His stats plummeted. The SSSS+ numbers on his status board flickered and dropped. Kyle felt the shift instantly. He surged forward with everything the hero skill could give him. One devastating sword strike, wreathed in light and flame and fighting spirit, caught Drake across the chest and sent him crashing through the castle gate, through the courtyard wall, through a building beyond. But Kyle hesitated at the killing blow. The hero's sword trembled in the air. Drake saw it, and his rage was incandescent. He activated a life-burning skill that pushed his body past its limits, crimson light bleeding from his skin. He screamed at Kyle to fight him properly, to kill him properly, to be the hero. I stepped in. I will handle this. Support me. Kyle's buff magic surged through my body. Every muscle, every reflex, every sense, amplified beyond what should have been humanly possible. The world sharpened into crystal clarity. Drake came at me with everything he had left, and I met him blow for blow. He was strong, desperately, brilliantly strong, but the crimson light was consuming him from the inside. Each second burned away more of his life force than his body could sustain. I told him the truth, that I understood the emptiness, that the feeling of living in a gray world where nothing connects, where no one understands, where the only moments that feel real are the violent ones. I did not call it an excuse. I called it a failure, not his alone, ours. The adults who should have shown him a different path, the system that armed a broken boy and pointed him at the world. So I will take responsibility, I said. I formed a dark matter karambit knife, small, precise, designed for a single clean stroke. He said 2 words, thank you. We moved at the same time. His fist grazed my shoulder. My blade found the gap between his ribs and pierced his heart. He died fighting, smiling. The crimson light had consumed the last of his life force. For someone with SSSA+ stats, the end was quiet, almost gentle, like a candle flame curling in on itself and going out. I stood over him for a while. Kyle stood beside me, tears on his face, back straight. Neither of us spoke. Some things cannot be made smaller by talking about them. Kyle knelt beside the body. He did not look away. He did not try to make it smaller with words. He just knelt there, the hero and the villain, the classmate and the corpse, and let the silence be what it was. I put a hand on his shoulder, did not say anything. What could I say? We had done the right thing. It did not feel like the right thing. It felt like the thing that needed to be done, and that is a different sentence entirely. The right thing implies clean hands. The thing that needed to be done implies hands that will never be quite clean again. That feeling was not new to me. The convenience store teaches you some responsibilities leave stains. You wash your hands and the stain fades, but the knowledge of it does not. With Drake's death, the complete domination skill dissolved across 3 nations simultaneously. Soldiers dropped their weapons where they stood. Reports flooded in from every front. Adeltund, Sadarkan, Baramits. The puppets whose strings had been cut simply stopped moving. Some collapsed where they stood. Some wept. Some stared at their own hands, as if seeing them for the first time in months. The war was over, not with a treaty, not with a surrender ceremony, with a boy dying in the rubble of a borrowed throne room and 100,000 puppet strings dissolving like morning mist. And something else happened. Something I felt the instant the blade pierced his heart. His skills transferred into me, complete domination. The combat techniques he had stolen, the accumulated experience of every person he had ever controlled. My level surged past 2,000 in a single violent spike. My status board rearranged itself around numbers that should not have existed. I did not tell Kyle, not then. He had enough to carry. Reed Commerce moved into post-war reconstruction immediately. 3 devastated nations needed supplies, infrastructure, communication networks. We had the resources. We had the logistics. We had the relationships with every major power on the continent. Factories pivoted from weapons to building materials, farming equipment, communication devices. Within weeks, our supply lines were feeding reconstruction across 3 kingdoms and stabilizing the economies that Drake's war had shattered. It was the biggest business expansion in our history. It was also the simplest work I had done in months. Restocking the shelves after a disaster, making sure the fundamentals were covered, inventory management on a continental scale. The summoned heroes returned to Runeguard, shaken. For many, it was the first time a classmate had died. The invincibility they had felt since receiving their cheat skills evaporated the moment they understood they were mortal, killable, that a boy they had known in homeroom was now in the ground. Kyle pulled me aside before departing. "The responsibility," he said. "I will carry my half. I know you will. And Reed-san, thank you for what I could not do." His grip was firm when he shook my hand, but his fingers were cold. The hero who had never failed had just learned what it cost to succeed at something that should never have been necessary. I watched him walk away with Sophie, Tudu, and Matsuria flanking him. The hero party, minus the villain they had been too late to stop. They would carry this. They would grow from it. Kyle was not the same boy who had questioned the summoning ceremony all those months ago. He was harder now, wiser, the kind of hero who understood that saving everyone was impossible, and that the impossible was not an excuse to stop trying. The week after Kyle departed, I handled the arrangements that needed to be handled in private. Drake's body was examined by Sage's research team. The findings confirmed what I had suspected. Summoned heroes were closer to monsters than to humans in their fundamental composition. It explained the skill transfer. It explained the evolution potential. It explained why the goddess's summoning ritual worked the way it did. The report went into a file that only I could access. Some truths are better introduced carefully, over time, when people are ready to hear them. Weeks later, with the reconstruction underway and the political landscape stabilizing, I found myself in a conference room with Jade. Just the 2 of us, door closed, the world outside continuing without us for a few minutes. "I need to show you something," I said. I opened my status board and expanded it between us. Name, Marcus Reed. Level, 2697. Strength, SSSS+. Magic, SSSS+. Stamina, SSSS+. Speed, SSSS+. Attribute, none. Skill, error. Jade stared at the numbers. 2,000, she started. 697. 2,697. She said it the way someone says a number they cannot believe they are saying. The way a bank teller reads an account balance that should not exist. It happened when I killed Drake. His accumulated power, his skills, his experience, all of it transferred into me. The same mechanism his complete domination used to drain victims. When I killed him, it reversed. Everything flowed back. And my level, which was already climbing from the war, broke past 2,000 and kept going. Osan, that is literally insane. I know. The hero is level 300 something. You are level 2600. That is not a gap. That is not even a canyon. That is a different planet. She reached out and touched the floating status display. Her fingers passed through the golden light. The expression on her face was not awe or excitement. It was fear. "The previous true hero," she said slowly, in the English journal. Her status hit error too. And then she approached something beyond human. Yes, silence. The kind that fills a room the way water fills a glass, from the bottom up, heavy and clear. Each of my garbage skills leveled independently, I said, because she needed to hear the logic, because understanding the mechanism would make the fear smaller, even if it could not make it disappear. Dozens of skills, all gaining experience in parallel with everything I did. While other heroes had one powerful skill growing linearly, I had dozens growing simultaneously. And as they evolved and merged, the compound effect became exponential. The goddess's garbage dump turned out to be the richest investment in the history of the summoning system. So what does this mean? What happens if you keep growing? Monsters that reach extreme stat levels undergo evolution. There is evidence that summoned heroes follow the same pattern. If I continue gaining levels, my stats will hit error, and the system may try to push me past the boundary of what is human into something else. Jade threw her arms around me, pressed her face into my chest. Her voice was muffled but unmistakable. Do not disappear. You are not allowed to disappear, you hear me? I held her. Did not say anything for a while. Just let us exist in the same space. Two people who had built something from nothing, staring at the possibility that the builder might become something the building could not contain. I will not, I said. My level is high enough that almost nothing can threaten me. The wars are over. As long as I avoid combat, the threshold stays out of reach. She pulled back, flicked my forehead hard enough that I felt it even through SSSS plus stamina. Then avoid combat, idiot. Let everyone else handle the fighting. Sit in your office and manage the business, like a normal person. Yes, ma'am. She smiled. Small, fragile, real. 2,697. The G-rank man. The G-rank man. If the goddess could see your status board right now, she would choke on whatever anime she is watching. I laughed. Actually laughed. It surprised both of us. It had been a long time. Jade looked at me the way she always did after the impossible became real. After the mithril golem. After the factory. After Kyle. After every wall I had broken through that she had watched me break. The old man from the convenience store, she said. The one who smelled bad and had no prospects and worked graveyard shifts nobody else wanted. That man was worth something after all. He was always worth something. He just did not know it yet. Neither did anyone else. No, but one person figured it out before anyone. A delinquent girl who called him Asen and followed him into another world. She punched my arm, hard enough to sting even through stats that exceeded every living being in recorded history. Shut up. You are going to make me cry in a conference room, and I refuse. Understood. In the weeks that followed, the world settled into something resembling peace. Violet's unified demon realm entered formal negotiations with the human kingdoms. Both sides were motivated by the same pragmatic truth: continued war against an organization that possessed enchanted cannons, armored vehicles, intelligence swords, and the single strongest being in mortal history was economically, militarily, and strategically irrational. Peace was the profitable choice. I had spent the better part of a year making sure of that. Every alliance, every trade agreement, every enchanted cannon and armored vehicle and non-lethal restraint system I had built, all of it converging on a single outcome: a world where fighting was more expensive than cooperating, and where one organization held enough power that both sides preferred its friendship to its opposition. Tiana and Tio patrolled the border regions, their intelligence swords humming with enchantments I had built. The Ice Princess and the Wind Emperor, my students, my family. Enemy combatants surrendered at the sight of them, rather than face the twins who had forced even Seraph to unseal her full power. Joan led Reed Commerce's main defense force with the Mechanism Sword, each engagement adding to a reputation that had become legendary across 4 kingdoms. Marceline served as military liaison between Reed Commerce and Runeguard, her tactical armor and unflinching pragmatism earning respect on every side of the negotiating table. Luna handled intelligence operations, her concealment skill making her the most effective scout in the organization. Even Medidovan, the reformed rebel, had joined our logistics network, his knowledge of demon realm supply chains proving invaluable. Every weapon they carried, every enchantment they wielded, every tactical advantage they held. I had built those things, not alone. Jade's engineering, Sage's research, Maria's management, Shirley's support, the whole organization, running like a well-managed store with 1,000 employees and a product line that spanned continents. That was the convenience store philosophy. Build the system, train the people, trust them to run it without you hovering over every decision. If I disappeared tomorrow, the weapons would still work, the fighters would still fight, the enchantments would still hold. That had always been the point. Drake was dead. The wars were ended. The rebel factions were crushed. Peace was not just possible, but inevitable. And I stood at level 2697, SSSS+, the most powerful mortal being in the history of this world, with a question hanging over me like a sky full of stars I was not quite ready to name. What comes after you have done everything? I did not have an answer yet, but I knew the question was waiting, patient and vast, somewhere beyond the boundary of what was human. For now, I had a business to run, reconstruction to manage, people to protect, shelves to stock. The G-rank man had reached the absolute peak, and the view from the top looked exactly like it always had. A world full of people who needed someone to keep the lights on, even when nobody was watching, even when nobody said thank you. I could do that. I had always been able to do that. Tomorrow would bring its own questions. Today, there was work. The war was over. Drake was dead. The kingdom had signed peace accords with the demon realm. Every external threat I had spent the last year fighting, negotiating, inventing, and bleeding for was done. My status board read level 2697. All stats at SSSS+. Skills. Error. The most powerful mortal in the world was sitting in a meeting room with his niece, staring at glowing numbers and feeling absolutely nothing like a conqueror. Jade, there is something I need to tell you. I know, she said. The godhood thing, right? She had always been sharper than anyone gave her credit for. I had never once managed to surprise this girl. I pulled up my status board so she could see it clearly. Every stat at the absolute ceiling. The error tag on my skills had been there since the very beginning, back when the kingdom appraiser had squinted at the display and concluded I was simply broken. But now, the rest of my numbers were pressing against the same boundary. SSSS Plus across the board. Level 2697, the highest any living being had ever reached. When Drake died, my level crossed 2600. My stats hit SSSS Plus. I have met at least 2 of the conditions for ascending to godhood: the skill, error, and the soul growth from absorbing Drake's power. If I keep leveling up, even accidentally, all your stats turn to error too, and you disappear. She said it flatly. No drama, just the facts. The way she handled everything now. She had grown so much from the bleached-haired delinquent who used to call me a useless old man with genuine contempt. Then, she threw her arms around me and pressed her face into my chest. "Don't go," she whispered. "I don't want you to go." I held her. We stayed like that for a while, not speaking, just confirming that we were both still here, still real, still family. Eventually, she pulled away on her own. Her eyes were dry. She had made a decision about something internal, the way she always did, without telling anyone until it was already done. "Okay, your level is insanely high. Normal life won't push it higher, and you don't need to fight anymore. We have Joan, the twins, Marceline, everyone. You can just sit back. That is the plan." She flicked my forehead hard. "Even if something shows up, you don't fight it. Let the others handle it. Got it? Got it." But we both knew the truth neither of us said aloud. If something appeared that our people could not handle, if a threat emerged that only I could stop, if protecting the family I had built meant crossing that threshold, what would I choose? I did not have to wait long for the answer. A month after we issued warnings to all the summoned heroes about the ascension risk, the world shattered its own peace. Reports came in from our branch offices across the continent. In the Mediterranean region, where the candy goblins had once lived, and where Medidovan's rebels had been based, strange creatures had begun pouring out of the earth. Black goblins. Small, featureless, dark as the void between stars. They infected the land, corrupted the plants, and turned any living thing they touched into more of themselves. Their status boards all read the same thing. Every stat, error. Every skill, error. A god-level threat. And there were thousands of them. Medidovan analyzed the data. The creatures, which he named Warashi, shared a single consciousness. They were not individual monsters. They were extensions of a single being, a divine entity that no longer existed in our world. A candy goblin boy who had absorbed the grief and rage of his entire massacred people, achieved godhood through pure hatred, and was now attacking our reality from beyond it. The world he wanted to destroy. The world that had taken everything from him. He did not need to be present to break it. His power leaked through like poison through cracked glass. Our forces deployed. Luna and Marceline led the advance team. I went with them despite Jade's orders, because nobody else could survive contact with god-level energy. The plan fell apart almost immediately. A stealth-specialized Warashi ambushed Marceline, shattering her armor and infecting her with the corruption. Black stains crept across her skin from the wound. She was turning. "Kill me," she said through clenched teeth, "before I become one of them. My body carries the ancient hero's bloodline. If you absorb my soul before the darkness takes it, it will not be wasted." I could not do it. I did not build an organization to protect people just to execute them when protecting got inconvenient. "Come back to me," I said. I pressed my lips to hers. In Cursecraft, the mouth is a conduit. Spells are spoken, spirits are channeled, poisons are consumed. I gambled everything on the idea that I could draw the curse out through direct contact, pull it into myself instead. It worked. The corruption flowed from her body into mine, and my stomach churned with nausea and alien cold. I sent Luna and Marceline away with a teleportation artifact. Then, I walked into the darkness alone. The deepest Warashi was waiting for me, not a soldier, a dreamer. When its darkness crashed over me, I did not find myself in a battlefield. I found myself in a city made of candy-pink buildings, full of candy goblins living ordinary, happy lives. A boy goblin with bright eyes and a new adventurer's badge was registering at a guild. He defeated bullies, slew monsters, saved his friends. It was a perfect world, an isekai fantasy inside a nightmare. I understood immediately. This was not an attack. It was a dream. A dead child's dream of the life he never got to live. "Can you hear me?" I called out to the dreamer. "I want to talk." The world froze. Color drained away. Only the boy remained, staring at me with eyes that held centuries of grief. He told me what I already suspected. He had absorbed the dying memories of every candy goblin who threw themselves into the sea in despair. Their collective hatred of the humans who had slaughtered them, their longing for a world that treated them with kindness. He wanted to erase reality and live in his dream forever. "You understand, don't you?" he said. "You've hated the world too." "I have." And then he showed me my own memories. The job interview where the interviewer told me I was a nuisance, where I had prepared presentations and studied the company's public information, poured everything into making my case, and been dismissed because my resume, with its repeated failed years, marked me as someone the system had already discarded. I had not understood then. I was too proud, too young, too certain that effort should be rewarded, regardless of how the world actually worked. He showed me the convenience store, the senior employee who snapped at me for not knowing tasks nobody had taught me, the manager who shoved me aside during rush hour because I was too slow, the colleague who proposed fair break rotations and never once kept the schedule, the owner who thanked me without looking up from his phone. Small humiliations, chronic and grinding, the kind that do not break you in one blow, but erode you like water on stone until you wake up one morning and realize you have stopped trying, stopped hoping, stopped caring about yourself or anyone else. I remembered the exact moment it happened. Not a dramatic breaking point, just a Tuesday. I was restocking the rice ball shelf at 3 in the morning, and I realized I could not remember the last time I had wanted something. Not food, not sleep, not companionship. The wanting itself had worn away. I had become a machine that processed tasks and awaited the next shift. That was the man this boy was showing me, the man I had been. The memories ended. Gray emptiness. The boy stared at me with desperate, accusing eyes. "Remember, you hated them too. Where did all that anger go?" "Here," I said. I pressed my palm against my own chest. I remember, looking down on everyone while despising myself, hating people with everything I had, thinking I was better than the customers, better than my coworkers, better than everyone, while simultaneously believing I deserved nothing. I remember all of it, every petty grudge. Every night I stared at the ceiling and thought about how nobody would notice if I was simply not there anymore. It was humiliating to admit, even now, even as the most powerful mortal in existence. The shame of who I had been did not evaporate just because I had become someone different. The boy touched his own chest, mirroring me. "It is all stored right here," I said. "Every ugly thought, every moment of weakness, but alongside it, there are warm things too." I thought of Jade's trembling hug after the mithril golem fight, Sage screaming with excitement over a magical breakthrough, grabbing their own head in disbelief, Shirley leaning forward at the guild counter, calling me her ideal adventurer with genuine admiration in her voice, the orphanage children laughing as Joan organized their games, Marceline's grudging nod of respect, offered like it cost her something, the twins whispering, "Sorry, Papa," after losing a fight they had been brave enough to enter, Maria pouring tea with the composed grace of a woman who had rebuilt her entire life on trust, even the goddess, panicking and rambling when she realized she had run out of skills to give me. The darkness and the warmth, they live in the same chest. That is what it means to be alive. The boy's eyes glistened. "But I'm still cursing the world, I know. You can hold both at once. The desire to heal and the inability to stop hating. That is not a contradiction. That is having a heart." I knelt to his eye level and wrapped my arms around him. "You could have dreamed of cruelty. You could have built a world where you tortured the humans who destroyed your people, but you did not. You dreamed of being a hero, of protecting friends, of living a life worth living. This dream is not ugly. It is proof that you are still reaching for something better." He pressed his face into my shoulder and sobbed. His small body shook against mine. I held him the way I wished someone had held me on that Tuesday at 3 in the morning, stocking rice balls with empty eyes. The way I wished anyone had looked at the hollow man behind the register and said, "You matter." Nobody had said it then, so I would say it now. "Your dream is beautiful," I said, "and I am sorry nobody protected it when it was real." He cried harder. The gray world around us flickered with color, brief flashes of warm memory breaking through like sunlight through clouds. A goblin family eating dinner, children playing in a stream, an old goblin telling stories by a fire, his memories. The the ones he was afraid to look at because they hurt more than the hatred. Then let me carry it, I said. Do not curse the world, curse me instead. I am one of the humans who inherited the world that hurt you. I was not there when it happened, but I live in the world that was built on what was taken from you. Let me bear that debt. He pulled a knife from his belt, black as the void, and drove it into my chest. I will watch you forever, he said. If your words were lies, I will curse the world again. The dream shattered. The boy's form dissolved into light. But if you really can hold me in your chest alongside everything else, then I will live inside you for as long as you keep that promise. I woke in white emptiness. Every stat on my board read error, even my name. A familiar voice spoke from nowhere. Well done, Marcus Reed. The goddess Avril materialized out of thin air, wearing her formal divine composure for exactly 3 seconds before dropping it entirely. Okay, real talk. You are partially a god now. You fused with that candy goblin kid. 2 souls, 1 divine vessel, but it is not permanent unless you want it to be. I can send you back. Back? To my world? Yes. Your people, your family, everything. You live your life, grow old, and when you die naturally, then you come work for me. I get a subordinate eventually. You get to keep your life. Everybody wins. She explained the system. Gods needed subordinates. When a summoned person ascended, they automatically became the subordinate of whichever god had facilitated their summoning. That was why gods participated in the summoning ritual at all. It was a recruitment pipeline, but the timing was flexible. She could defer my service. Why? I asked. Why would you do this for me? She dropped the silly act for 1 heartbeat, just 1. Because I was a hero once too, and I did not get to say goodbye. Then she slapped my back so hard I stumbled. So go say all the things I never got to say. And when you are done, you come back here and you call me Avril Senpai. Got it? Senpai? It is an anime thing. I have been watching Earth anime with divine power, and senpai is the coolest word. Just say it. Avril Senpai. Perfect. Now get out of my office. She shoved me, and I fell through light. The last thing I saw was her waving, grinning like a kid who had just gotten away with something. The goddess who had forgotten my name and dumped her garbage on me. The goddess who had just given me my life back. I fell through white, then through color, then through something that felt like waking up from a dream that had lasted both a second and 1,000 years. Jade hit me when I came back, punched my chest with both fists, silently, tears streaming down her face. Then she held on and did not let go. I told her everything. The boy, the dream, the curse in my chest, the goddess's deal. The fact that one day, when my natural life was done, I would ascend for real and go to work as a god. She listened to all of it. Then she was quiet for a long time. So you are not leaving, she said. Not today, not for a very long time. Promise me. I promise. Good. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing tears across her cheek. In that same rough, graceless way, she had done everything since she was 16. Because we have work to do, old man. She said it exactly the way she used to say it in the shop, back when old man was an insult. The word had not changed, but it carried the weight of everything we had survived together, and I felt it settle over me like armor. Decades passed. Reed Commerce became a nation. The Great Forest Autonomous Region, positioned between the human kingdoms and the demon realm, grew into a neutral power that made peace profitable for both sides. Violet married into our family and learned to cook from Maria. Sage continued their research in the basement laboratory and somehow produced a child whose other parent remained classified information. Kyle became a frontier lord, using his hero's sword technique to clear farmland. Joan raised the next generation of fighters. The twins became legendary adventurers with their own fan clubs. Shirley ran the administrative side of an entire civilization. Rosa grew from an orphan seamstress into a corporate executive who returned to her old orphanage every year to remind the children that their starting point did not define their destination. Luna continued to appear at statistically improbable times and places, which I had stopped questioning years ago. Time moved. Children were born. The boy goblin, Shasoban, manifested from inside me within a month of the crisis, complaining he was bored. Jade's response had been a deadpan, "Oh, so he just comes out. Great." He grew up among the goblin children of the forest, beloved and spoiled, and still carrying that edge of ancient grief beneath his laughter. Not everything was kind. 98 years passed. Maria was the first to go, 40 years before the end, slipping away in her sleep, with a face so peaceful it almost looked deliberate. I held her hand until it went cold and thought, this is the cost of loving people. You carry them afterward. Then Sophie, far too young. Then others, one by one, until the house that had once overflowed with voices grew quieter with each passing decade. The summoned heroes aged slowly, more like monsters than humans, but not slowly enough, not nearly enough. Violet would outlive us all. She was a demon of ancient lineage, and her lifespan stretched beyond anything I could comprehend. We spent many quiet evenings, Jade and I and Violet, planning how to leave her a country warm enough to survive our absence. She never cried during those conversations, but her hands always shook. In the end, it was just me and Jade. Our bodies had finally surrendered to time. She sat beside my bed in her rocking chair, holding my hand the way she had held it since the day I pulled her out of a dungeon and told her I would teach her to read. Her hair was white now. Her face was lined. She was the most beautiful person I had ever known. Jade, what? Thank you. You really did an incredible job. She squeezed my hand, harder than her frail fingers should have managed. How many times are you going to say that? Those were the last words between us. We fell asleep holding hands and did not wake up. I do not know which of us went first. Honestly, I do not think either of us would have allowed the other to go alone. We had never been apart, not since a white light swallowed a convenience store and a high school on the same afternoon. We were not going to start now. I opened my eyes in a place that looked suspiciously like an office. Ugh, I'm so tired. I don't want to work. Sprawled on the floor in a puddle of divine robes, surrounded by empty snack wrappers and a glowing screen displaying what was unmistakably a Japanese anime, was my boss. Goddess Avril Senpai, the most powerful being I had ever met, and the laziest. You stayed up watching anime again, I said. It was a 2-hour premiere special. You can't just stop after a premiere special. You watch 6 more episodes after the special. The cliffhangers, Marcus. The cliffhangers. She had, apparently, used her divine power to establish a stable connection to Earth's streaming services. The monthly subscription was paid in conceptual currency that I did not fully understand, and she refused to explain. I picked up the stack of glowing documents that had accumulated on what I was choosing to call my desk. Divine tasks manifested as something my mind could interpret as paperwork. Each one required a precise application of power to resolve. Administrative work, cosmic bureaucracy, the ultimate thankless job. I sat down. I got to work. The motion was so familiar that my hands moved before my mind did. 35 years of night shifts had wired this reflex into my soul. Apparently, literally. Come on, senpai. We have a mountain of these to get through. Why did getting a subordinate make my workload bigger? This isn't fair. She did not know what every convenience store employee learns on their first week. Capacity creates demand. The more efficiently you work, the more work finds you. The reward for good labor is more labor. I sorted through the documents. Light poured from each one as I processed it. Small problems across the cosmos resolving themselves because someone sat down and did the work. The door burst open. Marcus, there is some weird energy building up in our old world. Something about an impossibly cute cat being born from clashing divine forces. Shasubun, still pink, still loud, still a kid at heart despite being a god. A cat? A really powerful cat, but all its power just makes it cute and helpless. Should we smite it? Before I could answer, a hand cracked across the back of Shasuban's head with the precision of someone who had been disciplining children for over a century. Absolutely not. It is a cat. You don't smite cats. Jade, my niece, my partner, my family. She had ascended with me, pulled through by the magic circle we had shared since the early days, the bond that had linked our souls so deeply that when I became a god, she had no choice but to follow. Avril had complained about the unexpected extra subordinate for approximately 45 seconds before realizing that Jade would handle all the organizational tasks she had been avoiding for millennia. We will observe it, I said. If it becomes dangerous, we act. If it is just a cat, we leave it alone. Good answer, Jade said. I turned back to my paperwork. Behind me, Avril was already asleep again, curled up on the floor, with a half-eaten slice of Chicago deep dish pizza balanced on her stomach, and an anime episode auto-playing on her divine screen. Shasuban was arguing with Jade about whether divine smiting should require a committee vote. The glowing documents kept arriving. I kept processing them, one by one, methodically, without complaint. The same way I had stocked shelves at 2 in the morning. The same way I had enchanted products in a cramped workshop above a failing shop. The same way I had filed supply requisitions for an army, balanced trade agreements between hostile nations, and cataloged the emotional needs of a dozen people who depended on me for things they could not name. The work never changed. I was still the guy who handled what nobody else wanted to handle, but I was not the same man. That man, the one who shuffled through the convenience store doors with dead eyes and a permanent slouch. the one who had accepted his own worthlessness as a fact of the universe. He was still in here. I could feel him, stored in my chest alongside the Candy Goblin Boy's grief, alongside every grudge and every humiliation, and every night I had spent wondering if anyone would notice if I simply stopped existing. He was still here, but so was everything else. Jade's first hug, Sage's excited screaming, Shirley's mother pouring me tea, the twins calling me Papa, Joan's quiet pride, Marceline's salute, Maria's gentle corrections, Violet's theatrical tantrums, Luna's impossible devotion, a goddess who watched anime all night and pretended she did not care about anyone. All of it, together in the same chest, the darkness and the warmth, side by side. I used to think the work was punishment, that being the one who always cleaned up, always stayed late, always handled the jobs too small for anyone to notice and too important for anyone to skip, was proof that I did not matter. I was wrong. The work was never worthless, and neither was I. The documents glowed. I picked up the next one. Anyway, that is how a 35-year-old convenience store employee became a god.